All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this session of the Tacoma Park City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kovar.
Here.
Councilmember Dybala.
Here.
Councilmember Kostick.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Searcy.
Here.
All right, welcome, everyone. Our agenda this evening, there are no changes. Looking to the future, let's see what we have coming up. On Wednesday, May 9th, our next council meeting will be here at 7:30. We have our voting session. We will be voting on the first reading ordinance adopting the FY 2019 tax rate, adopting the FY 2019 stormwater management budget, and adopting our FY 2019 budget. And then on Wednesday, May 16th, again back here, we will have an update from the Youth Council. And then our voting session will include the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 19 tax rate, the FY 19 stormwater management budget, and the FY 2019 budget. And tentatively, we have scheduled the first reading ordinance approving traffic calming on 5th Avenue between Orchard Avenue and Eastern Avenue. And our work session that night is we have the investment advisor who's going to do a presentation for us on socially responsible investing. As many people know, the members of the Nuclear Free Committee have been asking us to look into this, and we have finally been able to find an advisor who will come and talk to us about that. And then we have tentatively scheduled a discussion of a draft resolution regarding Tacoma Junction site plan. And then the next week on Wednesday, May 23rd, again, the council meeting will be here. Our voting session tentatively is a resolution regarding Tacoma Junction site plan. Tentatively, the second reading ordinance approving the traffic calming on 5th Avenue between Orchard Avenue and Eastern Avenue. And our work session that evening is tentatively a presentation on the Purple Line. And then on Wednesday, May 30th, since we'll be having wrapped up the budget and everything, the council will not be meeting at that time. And then Wednesday, June 6th, we will be having our council meeting at the Recreation Center on New Hampshire Avenue. And we've done this this will be our third year in a row that we've had the first meeting in June on the Rec Center on New Hampshire Avenue. In particular, we usually have a proclamation on Immigrant Heritage Month that evening. And so we're going to continue that tradition in early June. And so that's our agenda for this evening. And the one thing for the record before we begin our meeting, we have a birthday. And it's not play them. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Terry.
Me.
Happy birthday to you. Yay.
Gee, I wondered how everybody knew.
Yeah.
Everybody that walked by me said, "Oh, happy birthday." I was like, thank you all.
Well, we all love you, and we appreciate you so very much, and thank you for everything that you have and still are doing. Oh, I can sit in the mic. I got to sit in the mic. Okay, I'm sorry.
Limit your comments to 3 seconds, please.
What do you say?
We just want to thank you so very much for everything that you have and do for Tacoma Park, and we just love you so very much, and we appreciate you because you are truly, truly genuine, one of a kind. So God bless you, and thank you, Terry, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, thank you. Doris, do you have anything else that?
This is for you. It's a vegan slice of cake.
The vegan slice of cake. Just for you.
This is just for you, Terry. Okay, and also we have a cake, a large cake. After I have y'all meeting, y'all come outside the room and get a piece.
Well,
so
thank you.
I hope I'm not in trouble. It's Joy's fault. And we ran into you when you were on your way here. So we did a lot of undercover work. So on behalf of the residents, we wanted to thank you so much for what you do.
Well, thank
and we
you.
would like to thank all the rest of the city council members and the mayor.
That was very thoughtful, and I'll give you a list of names and birth dates for everybody else.
That's fine. I mean, because I know when you saw us, you said, "Oh Lord, they up to something." And the reason why we don't come to the city council meetings is because we're sitting at home and we just notice how wonderful y'all are. You know, especially when it gets to be 10, 11 o'clock. So we wanted to thank everybody.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right. So,
Thank
great. All right. Well, let's get our meeting rolling so that way we have time for cake. Our next item of business is public comments on voting items. Our one voting item this evening is a resolution authorizing a temporary partial closure of the unit block of Grant Avenue for the Grant Avenue Market, which takes place on Mother's Day. Did I just... Yeah, the public comments on that, because it's a voting item. I said public comments. Right. So public comments on the voting item, which is...
The party's over.
I know what I'm doing. All right, any public comments on the resolution? All right, now, moving forward, any other just general public comments? I really want cake, so...
Hi, my name's Jacqueline Moore. I live at 7005 Aspen Avenue. And I just wanted to start by saying, with apologies to the recently departed Bob Dorough, creator of the Schoolhouse Rock songs, Tacoma Junction, what's your function? Bringing me traffic and noises and fumes. Tacoma Junction, what's your function? Blocking the fire trucks and police cars too? So... As an almost 26-year-old, wish I was 26 years old, 26-year resident of Tacoma Junction, I'm in favor of redeveloping the area, but it needs to be done right. I think you can do better. I think you should do better. And the citizens of Tacoma Park are counting on you to do better. The NDC reps who spoke at an earlier meeting used a lot of mushy language to give themselves latitude to make excuses. The orientation of the building should have been taken into consideration at the outset. That's just basic city planning and architecture 101. A tall north-facing building will create too much shade to make the area attractive and useful to the public. The one sad little Charlie Brown Christmas special ornamental tree in the plan won't be able to do much good if it's incorrectly sited. The lay-by is much too close to the public area and public seating options. I do not want a side dish of diesel fumes with my food and beverages. How can an asthmatic child or a person with pulmonary health issues find this public area a great place to spend time? The traffic plan to route trucks in a loop is a little crazy. How about if we have a fleet of diesel trucks do some loops in front of your homes to see if you really think this is a wise decision? The timing of the crosswalk light that was changed about 9 days ago is also incorrect, so the math needs to be redone because it will affect your studies. The junction's already far too congested. The current plan only adds vehicles to the already crowded roads. If there's a fire or a police emergency in my neighborhood, I don't want the response time to be delayed due to a lack of planning and foresight on your behalf. The current plan blithely ignores restrictions put in place by our state to ensure good environmental practices. The slope of the hill behind the proposed project is too steep to allow the successful implementation of the current plan. An example of the NDC mushiness was that the details of the bioretention feature haven't been worked out yet to show that they will not create a breeding ground for mosquitoes. The TPSS co-op has been a mainstay of our community. Stop treating them like dirt under your feet. They are an anchor. We should show them a little respect. I think you're moving too fast and ignoring your own resolutions from October. We need to slow it down and do it right, because you can do better. Thank you.
Finally, your turn. Are you ready? Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for giving me a few minutes here to address the group. So my wife and I moved to the Hillwood Manor community approximately 2 years ago, and we're here just to discuss funds needed for enhancing and adding to the park that's in that location. One thing that kind of struck me when I walked into this building was that the only other time I've been here for an official bit of business was when we had a bathroom installed in our house. And the woman who worked in the permit office was like, oh, 14th? I didn't realize we had numbered streets like that in Tacoma Park. And I say that because I think that represents a little bit of the mindset that we feel east of New Hampshire. And you think so? I think that once you venture past New Hampshire Avenue, we're kind of on the PG County line. Our backyard literally is the PG County line. And the park is kind of dilapidated, and I do realize that it's a Montgomery County park, and we've been put in touch very graciously, Madam Mayor. When we spoke a year and a half ago, I contacted Montgomery County after speaking with your office, and they said that they have a certain requisite. However, we think that the city could contribute. I mean, we moved here from D.C. like so many families did, specifically in our neighborhood within the last couple of years, because we want what's best for our children, right? And we think that if Tacoma Park has the funds to contribute to, it would certainly go a long way, because our neighborhood, everyone is kind of aging out, retiring, selling their homes, and there's at least 15 to 20 families that have moved in the last 3 years alone with children under the age of 3. It borders PG County, which, as I noted earlier, is it's exploding there as well. We're on 14th Avenue, 15th Avenue. Every other house has at least 1 to 2 children under the age of 3. So I think that there's a good need for that, and I would hope that, you know, as you guys are planning the budget, you can think about the fact that the residents that are close to PG, we chose Tacoma Park, we pay the Tacoma Park taxes, and just because our park happens to fall under the Montgomery County, it's a bit dangerous for us to have our young children crossing New Hampshire Avenue to find a suitable park to play. The only other note I would mention is I emailed just in support of the Tacoma City Junction. I really appreciate what you guys are doing and all the hard decisions you have to make. My wife and I lived in Cathedral Heights during that reno, and I know it's quite difficult, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing. We think Tacoma Park is great, and we're glad to be a part of the family here, and we look forward to many years. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Could you just repeat your name? Sorry, I don't think the clerk got your name.
Sorry, I didn't. Jason Strackman Miller, 14th Avenue.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Strackman Miller, also 14th Avenue, same household, and also speaking about the Hillwood Manor Community Park. Just to add some points, the park, we've learned from other residents, is at least 25 years old, if not older. At this point, it's unsafe. There's a ladder that some kids have repeatedly fallen through because...
Oh, I think he pressed it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. There's the slide is they're metal, they're rusty, they have sharp rusty pieces coming out of them. The wood is rotten. There are wood bees all around there. There's no real fencing between the road, and it's a pretty busy road with cars going by. It's just sort of thin metal. I'm not sure if you've seen any pictures. Okay. There's also now a sinkhole in the field that's developed, and Malachi here actually fell in it the other day. Do you want to tell about that, when you fell?
Yeah.
What happened? Did you fall?
Yeah.
And how did you feel? What happened? You a little shy now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. He's been telling the story since. He was pretty okay physically, but he keeps saying how he was scared and he was crying, and so please don't touch that again. And so, you know, like Jason said, we, you know, the part of Tacoma Park that we're in, we sometimes feel sort of like the forgotten part of Tacoma Park. And, you know, it's also a sort of, I feel like it's sort of a more racially and economically, diverse area of Tacoma Park. And we do have the PG residents also on the other side. And so I feel like this would be really good for our neighborhood and for the city of Tacoma Park. And that said, I just want to say Talisha Searcy has been super responsive, and you've been very dedicated to our neighborhood. And so I really appreciate that, and I feel like you see us, so thank you. You know, and we've been around to other parks in Tacoma Park, and they're beautiful, and they incorporate the nature around, and we have that as well, and we would love to do that for our children. And I just want to add also that I'm not sure if it's because, our neighborhood has been coming to these meetings, but Montgomery County has been coming to that park the past couple of days, and I actually saw a man today and, asked him what was going on, and he said, well, we don't have the funds, so we're patching it up a bit. And it's really not sufficient. And now there's mulch, and the swing set isn't even usable. And I told him about the sinkhole, and he said, oh, I'll throw some dirt in there. So it's just really not enough. We would really appreciate being considered. Thank you.
Good evening, Mary Rooker, Ward 2. I speak tonight as a member of the Co-op Board of Representatives. In our letter to you last week, we asked you to take some particular steps to ensure that your decision-making process for the Junction Development is fully informed and fair to all parties. We have not received a response to our specific requests, so I come tonight to formally request a response from you by May 9. We are extremely concerned that that the city has now scheduled a tentative vote on the proposed development for May 23rd before publishing the significant amount of relevant information that's still missing from the public record. This information relates to the traffic studies that will guide your decision, as well as racial equity analysis that is reported in only a single sentence. We do not believe this council action will disproportionately impact any particular group. In your October 25, 2017 resolution, you promised to provide the public with a reasonable opportunity to review the traffic studies before making your decision. However, you've not yet published anything more than a few summary slides presented to you by traffic consultants. Your traffic evaluation will play a crucial role in your decision and may lead to major modifications of local roads. It is essential that you publish the information and give the public a reasonable amount of time to review it before making a decision. We also asked you to publish the data and analysis underlying your racial and economic impact analysis. This analysis is important to us because a significant percentage of the co-op's workforce includes people of color. As we have previously reported, our workforce includes 21 nationalities and many multilingual employees. Also, we believe that the multilingual makeup of our staff is the reason a meaningful number of immigrants shop at the co-op. For these reasons, we have an interest in seeing that Council Resolution 2017-28, which commits the Council to systematically and deliberately applying a racial equity lens in its decision-making, is properly addressed. And third, we ask that you take a more active role to ensure that our concerns are resolved before reaching your decision. As we explained in detail, NDC remains unwilling to offer us reasonable accommodation of our 4 basic operational needs for deliveries, trash storage and pickup, parking, and business continuity during construction. Intervention by the city is necessary to ensure the continued operation of the co-op as a recognized, highly valuable public amenity. We would be glad to meet with members of the council and staff to discuss our concerns. In the meantime, it is essential that the city provide enough information to allow the co-op and members of the public to participate effectively in this decision-making process. Your active participation in the process is key. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Diana Bradley. I live at 40 Columbia Avenue, and I've been going to the co-op for 30-some-odd years, and I've only just seen the development plans, and I'm very concerned that there's not enough leeway for the delivery trucks to get into the co-op. And it's been a mainstay of our community for a very, very, very long time. So I am hoping that you can assure us that the co-op has the support that it needs. I'm also concerned, living on Columbia Avenue, that there'll be traffic coming through Columbia while it's being built, or maybe otherwise when there's congestion in that already very difficult and complicated intersection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Mike Royce. I live on Park Avenue. Regarding the budget, I'm asking the City Council to be financially cautious with the proposed budget because no one really knows how residents, especially homeowners, will be impacted by the new federal tax code. I'm asking each member of the City Council to make sure they understand the relevance of the current city employees in each department. If you do not understand the relevance of current city employees in each department, and you do not know if they add value to city residents, I urge you to vote no on the requested budget increases for additional staff until you fully understand their need. And this next item here, I'm not fully sure I understood this when I listened to the video from Monday night's work session, but during Monday night's work session, the city manager indicated that Lee Jordan Field behind Tacoma Park Middle School and Wilhelm Fields behind Piney Branch Elementary School, which are supposed to be maintained by the county, are actually being maintained by the city because some residents didn't like the job the county was doing. So if I heard that right, I would urge the city council to ask why the city is not complaining to the county to do a better job instead of expending the city's limited resources for something the county is already being paid for. And finally, your votes on the proposed budget will affect thousands of residents, either positively or negatively. Residents, including me, will not judge you for asking numerous questions to get clarification on an item, but they will, including me, judge you if you vote for something that you do not understand. So I'm asking that you please vote wisely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Steve Nave, longtime resident of Woodland Avenue, and I'm here to talk tonight about the co-op and the Junction and the relationship. And I first want to say I really appreciate all the work. I don't even understand all the work and the hours you guys have put in. And whatever decision you make, you know, I'm sure will be informed and a reasonable one. And I know it's been going on for years and years and years. However, it may be necessary to go on for some more time so that we as a city make the right decision. Also, that I think it's important to keep the dialogue going in a sensible, reasonable, proportional way, so people don't, because some people on both sides of the issue have gotten carried away, and I can understand that because it's an important decision. But I think the council has been reasonable, but sometimes people on the other sides have not been. So if we can tamp it down, that would be good, so we can keep our minds focused logically on the problem. My perspective is that the co-op is a key component, and the council has recognized that it must be able to survive the construction and to exist afterwards. So, and the resolution you passed last year, not many months ago, said that you would make reasonable, or the NDC has to make reasonable accommodations. And I think, as the co-op representatives have indicated, there are some reasonable questions being raised right now whether those accommodations are in fact reasonable. One of them involves that lay-by, whether that's going to work. I think it needs someone, an expert in traffic and planning needs to look at that. Maybe that's in those studies that should be forthcoming and will be published. But someone really needs to understand it. I don't say I can understand everything of the way the lay-by works and how the trucks will move in and out, but that's critical to do that. I saw tonight for the first time, maybe it was out several days ago, the community vision concept for the co-op. And when the second I saw it, I said, wow, this is incredible. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw it, because it was less dense, it was more open space, there was green space, there was place for a truck, what do you call those, pop-up trucks and so forth, vending trucks, and for a stage. It kept it open. This is not a very big area, and so it was much less dense in terms of the construction, and it seemed to meet the needs of the co-op in terms of traffic flow of the trucks going in and out, and the needs for some more kind of breathing room. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, you can come. Hello, Kelly Skelton, 7506 Glenside Drive, Ward 6, Talisha. Pro Talisha, pro Junction, pro Hillwood Manor Park, but I'm actually stopping here tonight to talk to you about the budget. And I'm sorry, we're going to leave right after this. I'm sorry for your meeting. And I think that you should vote on the budget tonight because we need to move this forward. But in terms of process, this is the first year that I've had the opportunity to follow your budget in this amount of detail. And I think, looking back, I looked back at like 3 years. And I think the presentation that the city manager did this year is vastly superior to every year. It seems to be getting better and better and better, and we're definitely in the right direction. But, I share the city manager's concerns about where we are in terms of our reserves and our undedicated fund balances. I think we need to move forward this year, but I hope that we can change the process for next year. Some of my suggestions might be to add a little more clarity to the way that we have our capital assets or the capital expenditures, and also how we are funding the reserves and how we show what the reserves are, and even how we use the reserves, honestly, because the reserves are a little confusing. Because if we're putting a garbage truck in reserve, we're not putting it into the waste management budget. Our waste management is fantastic, by the way. I lived in D.C. for like 10 years. Waste management here, love these guys. But, it makes it so that you can't see the complete budget of that department in the way that the reserve funds are currently set up to be used. I find it confusing. I don't know if we're going to expend the reserve in 2019. Is that really a reserve, or should we just put it into expense? Like if we're funding it for an expense in 2019, I feel like that's not a reserve. I feel like that's an expense of the current period. So, and also it would be great if maybe we could, because I sort of share a similar job to the city manager, and it'd be great if the council could maybe set a threshold and say, work to this threshold, because of course the city manager did a perfect job creating the budget that you would want in your ideal world. And I'm not even anti-tax. I think they shouldn't have lowered the tax last year. Should have at least maintained or increased. I mean, there's inflation. At least at an inflationary rate, taxes go up, right? I don't think that we shouldn't have taxes in the city. We have a lot of great services and we should pay for them. But I think that if you set a goal number, then the city manager has something to work towards instead of working towards the ideal that you've set up for her and your priorities. So you're all doing a great job. This is not easy. I watch you guys. If I don't watch it live, I watch it at work the next day, which I'm sure my boss would love to hear, and I'm sure he's probably going to watch it. But you guys are all working hard for us, and I appreciate it. But I would like to see a little bit better in 2020's budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, thank everybody for coming here. And thank you for being here. And I'm Mary Jane Maturi, Ward 2, a president of Parents of Special Needs Adults. We meet every third Thursday here in the community center at 7 p.m. Thank you. And I want to empathize. Someone said, Kate, that your mom died, and I want to give my sympathy and empathy. She must have died very young, is all I can say, and I'm especially sad about that. I want to thank Mr. Smith for coming to our last Parents of Special Needs meeting, and also Chief Duvall and Cindy. Where's Cindy? For hosting Chief Duvall's meet and greet last night at Joe Edgel's home and Barbara's home, and thank you very much. And now I'm going to say, what else? Well, I would like to limit the council meetings to 7 to 9 p.m. That's what my big proposal is.
I'm with you, Mary Jane.
In the middle of a sentence. Or just have them once a month if they're going to be a marathon about the Tacoma Junction. And I apologize. I'm very, very, very upset about all this stuff about Tacoma Junction. One of the main things is because there's so much of it, but you talk about how many nationalities you hire. How about disabled people? Over many years, I've asked for you to hire my son as other people like that. You never, ever, ever even speak to me about it, except, oh, we're working on it, or admit that you've never done anything in the past, which you never have. So I'm sorry for lacking empathy. But, should have a little more empathy toward people who have disabilities, and maybe also more empathy towards you. And I was going to say, I would like to raise the salaries of the crossing guards. under Duval's. I forgot to tell you last night to nag you about that. Well, I have a special neighbor, Doris Rogers, who's been a crossing guard for at least 40 years, probably more. And she only gets a little over $20 an hour, and I think that's awful. I think she should get more and a big award. And I'm concerned about the proposed property tax increases because they adversely especially hurt people who are younger than 65 years old and who make $61,000 or more a year. And there's a lot of people, $61,000 isn't a lot of money. So it's going to adversely affect a lot of people. And it's not just that, the county taxes they're proposing, the county, I'm not bitching just about the city, okay, the county too, the state, our groceries bills are going up, our medical bills, everything's going up except for my Social Security mostly. So just want to let you know, and it's a very complicated process, and thank you, Cindy, for sending the information about the property taxes. Which I've disseminated to some of my neighbors, because a lot of my neighbors don't have computers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
Welcome.
Hi. My name's Sara Fitzpatrick, and I wanted to make a few additional comments about the junction. I wanted to talk about my concern about the height and mass of the building. 42 feet seems extremely tall for a two-story building, and it would probably be more appropriate for a 3 or even 4-story one. I realized after studying NDC's drawings that they appear deceptive with regards to scale. In fact, each one of their slides contains the disclaimer not to scale. So I'm confused about why technical drawings, which include dimensions, wouldn't honestly represent scale visually. In the artistic sketches submitted, the viewer is above where the average human would stand looking down, and this angle minimizes the appearance of the size of the building, as do the giant humans and cars on the sidewalk and street. High retail ceilings like this are more consistent with urban designs, and this is not an urban area. I would like to see NDC submit drawings that are more accurately scaled and for them to explain in detail how they believe their design is appropriate for the intersection and the nearby neighborhood. I'm also concerned about the impact of the underground parking, which I understand is very expensive. In order to pay for the construction of the underground lot, rents will be much higher, making it difficult for small businesses to survive and producing an inevitable upscale retail space. How can we expect small business people to take a serious interest in such an expensive space? This points to an area of even greater concern for me, which is the clear path towards gentrification that I see here and that I know we've all noticed creeping in over the years in Tacoma Park and everywhere else. If NDC believes that their plan will not ramp up gentrification, then they have not demonstrated this. And I ask that the City Council make slowing gentrification more of a priority here. Whether local or national, small or corporate businesses, high rents mean high prices for customers. I am hard-pressed to imagine myself paying to park in order to eat at expensive restaurants and cafes on a regular basis, or even more ridiculous, paying to park just to sit on a bench in this public space. If I can't afford to shop or eat at these businesses, that is a part of my community that I cannot participate in. It's a place where I don't belong. So please ask yourself, if you see our city's poor, working class, or even middle class residents spending time in this space, where is our city's commitment to inclusion in these discussions? I'd like to see more of that. Further, I was encouraged to learn that the city recently passed a resolution committing to considering the racial equity impact of their decisions, as someone else mentioned, and I really thank you for your leadership in this area. However, I'm concerned about the cursory implementation of this. As someone read, it's a single sentence. For me, this doesn't begin to address the impact of this crucial issue, and I'd like to see how NDC and you would pay attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. It's a lively meeting. Chantal Warzala, Maple Avenue. Thanks so much for giving me a few minutes. I wanted to speak to the question of property tax increases. I do think that the city has a responsibility to keep the property tax rate the same. That does not, of course, mean that revenues won't go up because we have the issue of rising home values that are escalating our property taxes quite a bit. That's an issue both for those of us who have lived in Tacoma Park for a while, but particularly for those who are moving into our community, because of course they're taxed at the full assessed value. So when a property turns over, the taxes are now on the full assessed property value. Those of us who have lived here for a while are still kind of not being taxed at that full assessed value, thank goodness. I realize that creates a challenge for you all in considering the budget, but I have faith in your ability to make wise decisions and find ways to balance fiscal responsibility with meeting the needs and wants, some of the wants anyway, of the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Schlegel from Allegheny Avenue in Ward 3. And I've been up every week, and so I'll try to be a little briefer this week. I just wanted to focus on the small size of the public space in NDC's proposal. I see this as a kind of domino effect that comes from their need to pay for building all that underground parking, which then forces them to maximize the footprint, which moves the loading out to the street in the lay-by. Having the lay-by in the street pushes the driveway entrance to the far end, and the public space zone gets squeezed in the middle. Now that public space zone, it keeps shrinking every time I look at it. On April 4th, Colin Green said it was 45 by 60 feet, which would be 2,700 square feet. When I looked at their drawing from the public space and sustainability presentation a couple weeks later, what I saw was a gray shaded zone that, as I measured it very carefully, it was 1,896 square feet. But then I realized that they were pushing that zone well out past the existing curb line in their drawing. They were also making the sidewalk by the building only 5 feet wide instead of the 8 that they've promised. They also are counting part of that public space zone as to include the 7 feet of edge conditions separating users of the park area from the road. So when I make all those subtractions, I end up with the de facto public space zone being just 1,052 square feet, which is only 55% of the gray shaded area, and which is far less than the 2,700 square feet that we walked out on April 4th thinking we were getting. I think this is really important for reasons that previous speakers have said, so I won't restate what other people have said, but I think that from an equity standpoint, in terms of race and class, we've got to think of this project as our number one priority being bringing people together across race and class in this central area. And the two ways to do that are through affordable retail and through a meaningful sized public space that can truly serve for gatherings. I just don't see how this shrinking space can do that, and I hope you get the support you need to effectively analyze what NDC is sketching out there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Sleddin, 7203 13th Avenue, Ward 6, Talicia. Came here again tonight. I feel like I'm a regular. This is my fourth. I should get like one of those frequent flyer cards or something like that. What do I get free after that?
There's cake tonight.
Oh, okay. That's right. It's vegan though, right? Yeah, sorry. Oh, okay. So I came here tonight to ask you guys to put funds towards our park, specifically $250,000. The way I came up with that amount is I've done a little research on the average price that it costs to renovate a park. Somewhere between $250 to $350 is what I found. And I've noticed over looking at the budgets in the past couple of years is that Tacoma Park has repeatedly put towards that amount towards parks. In particular, the dog park in 2017. And so Earlier today, I found out how much has sort of been suggested to be set aside. And when I found out that amount, I was a little frustrated, actually kind of really annoyed, because I was told that it's $25,000. And when I hear that number and when I think about how much was spent towards the dog park, so I was told that $25,000 was put towards, is hypothetically maybe might be approved tonight of $25,000. But the dog park was $250,000. So in my head, that means our kids are worth 1/10 of what a dog park, of what a dog is in Tacoma Park. And that angers me a lot. And I don't understand how Tacoma Park approved $250,000 for a dog park before they made sure that all the kids' parks, whether it's Montgomery County Park or Tacoma Park, was okay and safe. Because our park, if you look at the pictures on my phone, is not safe. In fact, the recent water main break created a very unsafe space of about here to here, a 6-foot space that's not safe at all. There's concrete sticking out of it. And honestly, if I was a trigger-happy person, trigger-happy is not a good word. If I was a sue-happy person, my kid fell and got a scratch or something, I could easily sue Montgomery County, Tacoma Park. So I don't understand if making sure our kids don't have a safe place isn't a priority, then not being sued should be a priority. Because I would bet that if I were to visit all the other Tacoma parks and the Montgomery County parks in our area, I would bet good money that none of them look like our park. And that is what makes me really frustrated. So I'm asking you to please help us. And also the other thing is please don't just let anyone manage this. Someone take ownership of it, because Montgomery County is doing some stuff now, and they fixed something that doesn't need to be fixed. The bridge. It doesn't need to be fixed. So, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Reginald Ruffin. My family's lived on Kansas Lane for a little over 50 years. It's the first time I come before the City Council to speak on an issue, and that has to do with the co-op. The reason I'm here to speak about this, I haven't been here. I've been away. How do I say? Military service. So I've been away. And the reason I mention that is because I want to give a story. That is about the military service. And it's the same thing I think you're having to consider too. I'm looking at our cultural needs within Tacoma Park. What do I mean by that? For instance, when I was stationed in Bosnia, we had a situation where it was a minimal thing. They sent us out as a combat multiplier to go talk to the people of the village that we were building something beside. And what we found out was that these folk they were threatening a 200 people protest. We found out that these folk, all they needed us to do was to adjust our road just a little bit, because they had their older folk, the goats that they had on trails. And by the time we finished that discussion, they kissed us on the cheek and invited us to a pig roast. What am I saying to you as the council today? This company, NDC, not necessarily looking out for the cultural needs of the people. They might not, but you will. We know that. And that's what we're trusting you to do, to look out for the cultural needs of the people. It's similar to what happened on Poplar Avenue, Orchard Avenue, where we had to go before this. At that time, before we were annexed from PG County. We had to go to PG Council. We went to them. What the builders did there, they wanted to build the homes and turn them away from the street, which would have gave them a private code, but it wouldn't have made them a part of our neighborhood. Again, not considering our cultural needs. Been here for over 50 years. That co-op started off with cardboard and some boards on the floor. Then it moved to Silver Spring and it came back here, and we were proud to have it back here again. We're talking about just making that same adjustment on the road as we talked about on Orchard Avenue, those same kind of successful things that worked before. A middle road solution. We're not asking that, because I know that the economic return on investment would impact the community in such a great way that we have so much money coming in. But at the same time, with the gentrification process that has been mentioned before, it doesn't meet the cultural needs. So we need to look at the cultural needs, and I'm not saying that you're not, I'm saying that, but we need to look at the cultural needs of the people, the economic benefit of the return on investment, and what can we do to meet the middle road? Because if we don't do that, and NDC is not going to represent the people of the city, no, that's you. So we're asking that particular cultural need be taken in place, because it is affecting many people's lives. And again, like I said, it's the first time I spoke before this council. And with those particular stories that I'm sharing, those things are real-life solutions that actually work. I know you deal with real life all the time. So we're asking that you consider that and then put that into your thought process, a seed for thought, that it can somehow some middle-of-the-road solution that can meet both the people's needs as well as the council's needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jessica Landman. I live in Ward 1 on Park Avenue. This evening I wanted to touch upon two links between the budget and the planned development at Tacoma Junction. These are issues that I think we as taxpayers need to understand better from the council, hopefully before we move forward. My first question is the one about possible hidden budgetary impacts from reconfiguring the roads around the junction. Both of the preferred traffic mitigation proposals that were put forward during the traffic study presentation last week would involve some fairly significant changes, some of them to state roads, but some also to local roads, involving sidewalks, the bike share stands, bus stops, existing park. All of those things would be impacted. And it's possible that we would need, for example, additional legal services to address land transactions and historic preservation issues that could arise if the current configuration of the properties has to change to accommodate the roads. So I think it would be helpful for the city to clarify how possible hidden costs for the budget are going to be addressed in the traffic implications of moving forward with the recommended revisions, and have those possible expenditures been factored into planning for this project, but also for this year and the coming year. So that's my first. The second question I wanted to ask about is another possible budgetary risk to the city that arises from the most recent NDC project plan. Under this more recent plan, the NDC folks would acquire the adjacent site and then construct a single building that straddles the property line and occupies both sites. The city would have ownership only of part of the underneath of the building, but not the entire building, and it wouldn't own the land under the sole entry and exit to the garage. Now, I am not a real estate lawyer, but I did inquire of a friend who is a real estate lawyer, and he thought, as I did, that this was weird and not a normal type of arrangement that could potentially put the city at financial risk. For example, if the developer were to go belly up, the city would have a very difficult situation on its hands. It could be costly to disentangle the city, or it could be a problem with a new owner on the adjacent lot who doesn't have the same interests as the city. We risk being stuck in an uncomfortable situation, either having to buy the lot to protect our investment at a price that could be, gouging us, because that person would have the city over a barrel. So please clarify, if you would, whether the city has taken this risk into consideration in looking at this NDC plan for a building that straddles two properties across the boundary. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Marielle, and I'm here to address the Junction Development and Community for All. When some residents in Tacoma Park won't have the opportunity to enjoy the proposed junction development, this affects us all. When tax dollars are used to support the development on public land, and yet not everyone in Tacoma Park will be able to access that space, then all of us lose. When we choose to use public land to separate rather than build community, this disturbs us all. No one in Tacoma Park intentionally wants to create barriers that divide versus build community. However, without closer examination, this is what the proposed plan will do. City Council members and Mayor, please explain to us, how will the proposed development on public land provide opportunities for enjoyment by all Tacoma Park residents? If this development were intentionally designed with inclusion as a top priority, picture Black youth from Ward 6 finding purpose in a welcoming place at the junction. Imagine Latino immigrants who live near University Boulevard gathering at the junction because it is their plaza too. Think of African families and people living on low incomes who reside on Maple Avenue, coming to the junction and feeling a comfortable sense of place and community. What about the lunch and learn kids and their families? How will the people who form the majority minority in Tacoma Park not only be welcomed on this public land, but regularly seek out and experience this space? In Ward 6, the Crossroads Farmers Market is situated on public land. Crossroads describes itself as a lively community gathering place for people of all backgrounds and incomes. Why is this approach not appropriate for the junction? Will the proposed development serve as a community gathering place for people of all backgrounds and incomes? If not, then we will have built a barrier on public land. This will affect us all. We all prosper when community is strongly connected, and this prosperity will contribute to economic development. From my perspective, and I am not alone, the proposed development on this public land fails as a gathering place for people of all backgrounds and incomes. And you, mayor and city council members, are the ones who control the lights for development at the junction. As it stands, a yes vote on the proposed plan will result in the city agreeing to use public land and public funds for development with the intention of exclusion. A public space that is only a spot on a sidewalk and near an entrance to a parking garage is still the back of the bus, no matter what architectural vocabulary is used to camouflage it. Retail and commercial establishments that are not affordable to a large segment of Tacoma Park residents represent institutionalized discrimination on public land.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Jeff Trunzo, Sherman Avenue, Ward 3. I'm talking to you tonight about support for the FY19 budget as prepared and as you might adjust. I think it's a fair and just budget and supports the many initiatives that city residents have insisted are important to the success of Tacoma Park and that reflect our core values of building and maintaining a city that serves all its residents. I particularly want to express my support for our hardworking and dedicated city staff. I do not believe that they are overpaid for what they do. Our people are our most important resource, and they reliably deliver on the initiatives which support our high quality of life and our position as a welcoming and supportive community for all. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Council. Mark Sherman on Hancock Avenue. At the event a couple Sundays ago where we all met in the afternoon at the public lot next to the grocery store, I took it upon myself to talk with people who I realized I had some disagreements with because my objective was to see if there was any common ground. And so I've been engaging in a series of one-on-one conversations to see what it is that people really want. What I hear people saying is they want something imaginative, something different, something bold, something that strengthens the junction as a whole. And I have no problems with something that satisfies those criteria. But the proposal before you, I think, fails on a number of counts. You may recall that 3 weeks ago I asked, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And then a couple of weeks ago, I said there are some real problems there, particularly when it comes to traffic, turning left into or out of a number of sites there in the junction, including the grocery store, the public lot, R&S Automotive, and so on. As I thought about this, I came to a conclusion I was not expecting to reach. As I realized that the entrance to the little parking lot on Sycamore was not workable because people turning left hold up traffic behind them. And as I realized that the entrance to the public lot was unworkable because you couldn't turn left into or out of that lot without crossing a bunch of lanes, I asked myself, so where are people supposed to get into or out of that whole stretch of land between Sycamore and the fire station? How are they supposed to enter any of that property? And that's when it occurred to me that the only logical place for vehicles to come in and out of that whole stretch of property is through the existing central intersection where Grant and Carroll and Ethan Allen all come together. There's one problem. There's a building in the way at 201 Ethan Allen Avenue. That's the building where the grocery store is now located. People with whom I've worked very closely are frightened when I bring this up because what it implies is that building has to go. But I do not in any way want to suggest that the grocery store should go. On the contrary, I propose that a new grocery store be built closer to the fire station, a larger, better facility that meets its needs, and that become the even better anchor of the junction than it is already. And by bringing traffic in where that building now stands, you can be regulated by the lights, by the crosswalks. All safety issues are resolved. That's the sort of out-of-the-box thing that people have been asking for, and so I wanted to present it to you this evening. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening. Steve Sleddin from 13th Avenue. It's been so exciting to hear so many neighbors come and talk about the park at Hillwood Manor. I just wanted to share what happened. So yesterday the county came to the park and fixed something which was not broken, right? So imagine that you are an average citizen, not a government, I don't know what's a better word for nerd, government enthusiast, and you're just sitting there and you're complaining about the ladder, and then the county pulls in with all their trucks and fixes the bridge, which is fine and working awesome. So it's frustrating because that money could have been used to fix what we're really here to ask for. And this is something, if you're not a government enthusiast, how do you differentiate between the city and the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission? I mean, it's very complicated. And so that's really what I'm here to ask your help with. I just want to hear that you guys we're going to make it work. We're going to figure it out. I do think that $250,000 is an appropriate number because that's what was spent on the Colby Tot lot, that's what was spent on the Hillwood Manor Overlook Park, and that's what was spent on the dog park. But let's get some grant. We are here, we want to work together, and we've got people who can apply for grants, we've got connections with community nonprofits, but I think that's what we're really looking to hear is Hillwood Manor, we hear you, and we're going to figure out a way to make it work, right? And I know that we can do that. So thank you all for your continued attention and concern to our manor, our issue. And these past couple of weeks, we have been going to VFW Post 350 to watch it on City TV, and it is much more palatable. So I would invite all of you in the audience, if you would care to join us, we will be there shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other public comments this evening? No? All right. Thank you, everyone, for your comments tonight. We'll now move on to council comments. Any council comments this evening? Councilwoman DeBala.
Just really quickly, I want to echo Mary Jane's thanks to the police chief and to all the residents who came out last night. It was a great group and a lot of great questions, and thank you all for doing that. And I also want to thank all the residents, and it's a lot of residents, that have contacted me about the budget, about the junction. It's just fabulous to have that kind of involvement, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Kostick.
Thank you. I just have two quick things. One was that I attended last week on Thursday a forum in Rockville on the Visualize 2045 plan, which is a long-range transportation plan that the Council of Governments Transportation Planning Board is working on. And it was a great opportunity to talk about some transportation issues in the whole region, not just locally, but throughout the whole metropolitan area. And we got to talk about things like bus rapid transit, trying to find ways to increase the number of people who are closer to jobs, and so that housing and jobs are closer connected and easier to access. And a variety of other topics. And I just wanted to let people know that you can still provide comments related to these things online if you didn't have a chance to go to the forum. If you go to www.mwcog.org/visualize2045, you can go on there and provide your thoughts regarding transportation in the region. I also want to thank the Ward 3 residents who came on Saturday to the listening session that I arranged, and we had a great chance to talk about the budget. We talked about Tacoma Junction and a variety of other things, and it was great to hear from people and have a dialogue. So I want to encourage anyone who didn't have a chance to come, or anyone who came and wants to come again, to attend. I'm having another one tomorrow from 7 to 9 p.m. here in the community center in the Azalea room. So if you're available, I hope you'll join me then. Thank you.
Councilman Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I heard an anecdote this week that I'd like to share with the community about our police department. And it happened some time ago, but I still think it was worth sharing. It was on the evening before Thanksgiving. There was a call from a woman who was in an abusive situation. The officer went to the house to check on her and the situation and dealt with the family to try to eliminate the problem. And part of the problem was a lack of food that was being experienced. And anyways, I found out that the next day, the officer returned to the house and to see how things were, and the woman said that things were much better and thanked him for talking with each of the family members and trying to deal with the situation. But then the officer gave the lady a package which included Thanksgiving food and a spiral ham, something that he had purchased out of his own pocket. And of course she was very thankful, but not only did he resolve the situation, but also went a step beyond. And I think it's kind of typical of what's good about the Tacoma Park Police. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Searcy?
So first, I just want to say thank you to all of the Ward 6 residents that have come out to talk about the park, to talk about the budget. It is so overwhelmingly just a beautiful thing to see the community engagement, but also the expertise that people bring. My gosh, I'm smarter just because I'm around. I live near so many smart people who are constantly in tune to what's happening and constantly providing me with helpful feedback. And I just want to reiterate again my gratitude to all of the Ward 6 residents who've come out and volunteered to work on different issues. So thank you all so much. Last night, I don't want to steal the city manager's thunder, but last night was the Purple Line Community Advisory Team, or the CAT meeting, and I know she will provide an update. But again, that was another opportunity for residents that will be impacted by the Purple Line. That is the stations that are along University Boulevard, Piney Branch, Tacoma and Langley, as well as Riggs Road stations, to come out and provide feedback. And there were so many residents from Ward 6 who volunteered to serve as CAT members and asking a number of critically important questions about pedestrian safety along that stretch, which is one of the deadliest in the state of Maryland. And so to feel that you're not fighting alone, you have city staff there, you have residents representing various neighborhoods in the community, really trying to make sure that the message is heard, that it's going to be critically important that we ensure the safety of our residents as the train is being developed. So it was a great exchange. There will be notes, and the city manager will also provide an update, but I want to just let folks know that happened last night. Also just want to thank Daryl for all of the work that she's been doing in terms of the, we're calling it the wetlands, but the working with Parks and Planning and residents in Ward 6 on Glenside and Jackson to get some sort of resolution regarding the water backup that's happening back there. So I know there's still a little, I think everyone's not 100% sure when the meeting's going to happen, but we'll work together to just make sure that there's some clarity on when we'll bring residents, staff from the county, as well as you all together to kind of talk about the issues that folks are expressing concern over. That's all I have. Oh, one more thing. So I just want to thank and use this opportunity to say congratulations to the seniors at Blair High School lacrosse players. It was senior night. That's why I was afraid I wasn't going to make it here. But the boys and the girls were able, I think this is some of the final home games. And so lots of seniors were recognized tonight. And so I just want to say kudos to Blair Lacrosse and all of the seniors that play. Thanks.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. One upcoming meeting I wanted to mention. People are aware if they've either live in North Tacoma or have driven through on the way to Silver Spring recently during the day that there's a lot of activity taking place there with the work that PEPCO is doing in the area, and there's at certain times of the day detours and so on. And this is a project that's going to be going on for some time in other sections over time as it gets closer to Silver Spring. So there's a community meeting to learn about it, to ask questions, to tell PEPCO whatever you think. And that is on Tuesday, May 8th. That's Tuesday of next week. And that's here in the, it's going to be in the Azalea room, but it's here in the community center. So whether you live there or just have to drive through the area, feel free to come. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I just have a couple of updates. One, I have a question for the city manager, maybe deputy city manager. How time-consuming and difficult would it be for our city TV staff to pull together the clips of comments on Hillwood Manor Park for us? Would that be?
We can check. I mean, it seems doable.
I think we should pull together, because I know Councilwoman Searcy and myself have been communicating with folks at Parks and Planning, but I actually believe hearing from residents themselves, as we have, would be much more compelling than anything that either one of us could say or write in an email. So if we could check on that, I would like to pull that together. The other thing is, I just, as I said, Monday night, I just want to thank everyone again for all their support while my mother was ill and when she passed away this past Friday. It's just been very grateful. I've been very grateful, and so has my family, for all the support of my colleagues here, the city staff, and all the residents, particularly Councilmember Siemens for running the meetings the last week and a half. I just want to note that my mother loved visiting Tacoma Park, and she was here the weekend before she passed away. She actually got ice cream at Gusto's, at the new ice cream place next to the Italian restaurant. She was here for my very first swearing in, when we had a lot of conversation about the dog park, and every time I would literally talk to her, she'd say, "How's that dog park doing?" She loved the farmers market, and in particular, Mark's Kitchen was one of her favorite places to eat of all the places around here or where she was in Florida. So I will be leaving town again for a couple of days to go to Florida, attend her service, and wrap up things with her home. So if you're looking for me, I may be a little delayed in responding. And along those lines, I will say Ms. Rooker had to leave, but I did this afternoon actually send a letter to the board chair of the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Co-op requesting a meeting to discuss the letter they sent to us on April 25th. So I think our letters this afternoon may have passed, and just apologize that I was out of town and was delayed in responding to that. But we have sent a letter to the board chair of the co-op requesting a meeting to discuss how we can proceed in this process and be of assistance to the co-op as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you. Regarding the traffic signals and pedestrian signals at Tacoma Junction, there have been a lot of concerns. There's been a lot of surprises because in the past 10 days, the signal systems got switched from State Highway to Montgomery County. I believe that the county was trying to switch them back to settings that had been some time ago. And as doing that, it takes a while for it to work, and they keep tweaking and keep tweaking. One of the aspects is that there's interest by the county by having the pedestrian light at the junction specifically during an all red phase only being for 10 seconds as opposed to 30 seconds, and then cars could start turning. And they're kind of experimenting with that. This does help traffic flow, and it is similar to many other locations. Nevertheless, they didn't tell us. They didn't make any notice public. There were no signs that there was a new traffic pattern. So it was not what people were accustomed to, either drivers or pedestrians. They will continue to be working on it, I think perhaps up to another week or so. They have said that they will contact the city kind of with their recommendations from the county, but the final decision maker about how the timing actually will be set is State Highway still. So the county plays with it, but kind of the real phasing does have to have approval by State Highway. So we will keep in touch. We're trying to get signs or other flags or something out there to let people know that it is still a new traffic pattern. They need to be very cautious. This Sunday is our TKPK 5K. Yes, sir. Yes.
So the question I had is, are pedestrians being told it's a new pattern, or are drivers being told?
No one is being told.
Okay.
That's the problem.
All right.
Neither the pedestrians nor the drivers have any indication. And so people who are used to having all red for the entire time they cross both legs are surprised when cars start turning. Cars all of a sudden go through and don't realize that, oh, there's pedestrians in an area where it's been a certain way for some time. So I can argue both sides of the options.
I mean, that 10 seconds makes me super nervous.
The mere fact that there weren't any kind of series of alerts while they're playing with this and still adjusting with is a problem.
So are we going to try to get them to put up signs or something?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd also like to add if we can put up signs at the fire station intersection as well. I know that's been an issue for pedestrians crossing as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go back then to on Sunday. It's the TKPK 5K, the run and walk for the 10th anniversary of the Safe Routes to School Programs Challenge. And I'll have details in my city manager's notes about the closures and those kinds of things that are on the city website. We're trying to get the word out on those. As Councilmember Searcy mentioned, the Purple Line Community Advisory Team meeting was held. City Planner Jamie Ernst attended, along with the council member and a number of other folks. It's very important for folks to pay attention to these. Sign up for the alerts. I get them for the ones the CAT area that affects me. It's very helpful to know when something's going to be closed, when they're changing lights patterns, when they're testing various things. So things that were going to be happening beginning this spring, starting along University Boulevard, starting from Adelphi Road and working towards Carroll. We'll have lane closures. There will be tree clearing, overhead and underground utility relocation, traffic signal reconstruction and timing, and this will continue for the next 6 months in that span. So you'll see things out there, but if you want to be aware of them, if you're a business owner, if you're somebody that goes through this area or you live in the area, please pay attention and sign up for the alerts. There will be utility notices to the businesses and the residents, and I've received them in my neighborhood, so I know they come. But it's very helpful if you know that it's part of a plan. And so please keep on top of that. And we as a city will keep on top of that and share the information. They also have a 24/7 telephone line. So if there's something that is a problem, there's a number that people can call. I have quite a lot of information in my city manager notes just about the development review process related to Tacoma Junction. Most of this is information that we've had before. I was trying to assemble it in one place. We've been compiling council member questions and concerns related to the site plan that NDC put forward. This information will be packaged and submitted to NDC on this Friday. So if there's additional comments that, we've been soliciting them and catching them all along, and we'll submit them to NDC for their response this Friday. It's also being used by us to help identify components of a draft resolution for your consideration. During the May 16th work session, you would identify changes either in the plan or in the resolution related to the plan, and then tentatively decide is on the schedule for being considered again on May 23rd. If the council votes to move forward, the site plans will be refined then by NDC and submitted to Montgomery County Department of Planning for the development review process. And we have the links again to what is looked at in that process in terms of a site plan checklist and preliminary plan checklist. It then goes into the development review process, which is open to the public, but during development review team meetings, it's not a place where there's public comment. You can observe that. Part of that development review committee includes Maryland State Highway, the Montgomery Departments of Planning, Permitting Services, Environmental Protection, Transportation, WSSC, and PEPCO, and looks at fire department access and constraints, as well as all the kinds of site plan issues that do come up. This information then, before it gets submitted to the planning board, the council can choose to consider it again, especially if there's any kind of changes that were noted or issues that arise through the development review process. So you can take make other additional comments on it or changes before it then, and those comments then go to the planning board. As part of the county, this is state law, as well as in the memorandum of agreement that the city has with the planning board, it takes a 4 of 5 vote of the planning board to override a position of the city council. Community members can testify at the planning board when it comes before the planning board. State Highway Administration has, as I mentioned, an active role in the development review process through that committee. But also, because these are state highways that are involved, they have final say on what happens on the state highway. This is kind of a 2-tiered process. So we've been working with State Highway all along. We've been in communication with State Highway pretty closely. So they work both through the development review process as well as our independent discussions with them and State Highway's role in that. The current project with the traffic studies, they are getting the new information that's been received. First of all, we got the new traffic signal timing that's still being refined. They are getting, I believe, it's just been completed, the traffic study for 117 Elm Avenue project, and they have estimates related to the Tacoma Park Middle School expansion as part of those numbers. All of that information is part of that the traffic studies need to have for the development review process, but are also of interest to State Highway. It is possible for a development review project to be approved conditionally before permits are released if there are specific requirements such as dedicated funding for intersection improvements. So there can be kind of a tag team approach, and there could be a conditional approval of a development saying that if certain improvements are in a budget to take place, that there could be some conditional permitting related to that. There's a lot of timing questions related to this. We are still having discussions on all these different components, and I think it's going to keep going like that for quite some time. The city's been lobbying State Highway for years for improvements to the Tacoma Junction intersection. We're very concerned and continue to be concerned about pedestrian bicycle access as well as the traffic flow through the area. I'm very pleased that State Highway is interested in helping us with that. We see how far that goes. Nevertheless, we also have staff working on the application for a Transportation Alternatives Program grant, a TAP grant, as we've received some in the past, for improvements to this intersection. And this actually kind of goes in conjunction with State Highway. We do not know what the likelihood is of that being accepted and how that would work, but we're trying to make sure that we're doing our part to be a partner to move the project forward. As I mentioned, both the redevelopment project and the transportation intersection, the junction intersection improvements are complementary, but they are individual initiatives. And so that's it just takes a lot of staff time and coordination. I've appreciated a number of council members have also been involved in encouraging this along. It's part of the reason that we don't have full traffic study information yet, because we keep getting different things and having to change. The traffic firms have to change things. So it's frustrating from my perspective, but it's also the nature of the beast, and we're trying to stay on top of it and make sure that we get the best information and best coordination of all the parties as we can. I'm hoping we get information for you all very shortly.
I have one quick question.
Yes, sir.
Normally, with these transportation projects, these major projects, the city goes to, or any municipality goes to the county and tries to get on the county's list that it sends to the state. Because this project, the development, the proposed development, has triggered this review with SHA, do we have to go through that same process, or that short circuits?
It short circuits it. Okay. And we have not obviously been successful going through it. I mean, part of the reason, as much as people are frustrated with the intersection, it's not the equivalent of the Montrose Road connection at 270 or something, which is so. When you think about what a county puts forward as its priority projects, it's not thinking about this kind of a location. This is a neighborhood commercial area, even though it's with state highways, and so. We've been unsuccessful for years, even for New Hampshire Avenue, which is a much bigger and project that can have a lot more economic benefit. I have appreciated that the state highway administrator has recognized that we're, by our location, in a place that we haven't been championed by either county, and so I appreciate that we do have attention, but a lot of it is because we have a development project in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Were you done with this?
I'm done
part?
with that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. It's good to have it spelled out in one place. And so I'm
hoping. I mean, there's still more stuff, but I'm trying to lay it out.
This is really helpful, and so I just want to remind people that if you want to read this, this is going to be posted.
It's online. It's in two places. It's attached to the agenda page for the council, but it's also if you just type in city manager comments on the website, it's on my city manager page, a little chart with the various city manager comments.
And I have two questions
it's not up there yet, but it will be.
Okay, I have two questions about the process. One is when speaking of staff, I assume that the city staff is going to be tracking the county review process very closely.
Oh yes,
and reporting back.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, just want to.
We always
make sure
do.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, and then on the Transportation Alternatives Grant, does the City Council typically write a letter of support, or is that assumed?
Well, it comes from the city, but we would discuss it with you and show. I mean, I think it. We're getting the background information for it now.
So when you get to that,
yeah,
if I might
we'll
be so bold
we'll be bringing that forward. I think it's due in a couple weeks, so it's something that we're paying close attention to, and we'd share.
Oh, yeah. So if there's anything we can do as a council to.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Councilman Kova.
Thank you for all that, and I'll read it through in more detail. One question, a couple of points, but one question, you mentioned the conditional approval, and maybe you could say a little bit more about who would do that and how that would be done.
I'm going to try to not misspeak, but basically the planning board is the one that would issue an approval of the site plan, combined plans. But it may be, and they often have conditions as to that approval. And one of the conditions could be that there's proof that there will be a project done at the intersection. So they may give that approval with that condition, but you cannot, until that funding source is identified, until there's something that's shown that demonstrates that there's a commitment to it. It may be approved, but they can't go get permits because they have to wait till that condition's met. So often on site plans there's conditions. You have to get something else and whatever. This could be one of those conditions.
So it would be helpful, and it doesn't have to be done right at the moment because it might involve some legal review, but if a version of that were to happen, how that would fit in with the idea of NDC fairly soon potentially beginning to pay rent, and how that would all sort of function. Because it sounds like you're saying it's conceivable that if conditions like that were attached to it, sometimes, as I think others on the panel were saying, it can take a while to get that money, whether we're applying for a grant or the state highway decides to put it on the list, or all those things. That's not necessarily an immediate thing, and so it would be helpful just to understand what that would mean for that part of it.
Well, they would specify what the trigger is. I mean, it's not just that might happen. There would have to be some trigger before.
Right, but would NDC be responsible for paying rent throughout?
That's a separate
process?
thing. Yes, that's the development agreement. That's a separate
Okay.
issue.
Okay. And then the other question was, and it's not really a question as much as a comment, you mentioned that there's the additional data that has to be gathered or is being gathered or researched or pulled together and analyzed for the traffic study in particular, because there's the potential for the larger Piney Branch Elementary or the
no, it's Tacoma Park Middle School.
Middle school. I mean, and the Elm project, right?
That's
so
right.
that's being put together, but we don't have that yet.
Right.
So,
they had gotten estimates for the numbers, and that's what they even presented when they came before you. However, the actual, my understanding is that the actual traffic study for the Central NIA project got completed at the end of last week. So I think the full documentation apparently is available to be transferred, if it hasn't already, to those two firms that would be incorporating that information.
I would just say, there's a lot of factors that will come into play on a potential vote, and I understand it's only tentative, but being that close to the tentative vote date, not having that data yet, is a real source of concern for me. So.
Of course.
I think it's a real source of concern for all of us up
It
here, and that's
absolutely.
That's why it's tentative.
That's right. It's a real source of concern. The other thing is, and I'm not going to say that that's what I'm planning here, but when we talk about conditions, you may also have conditions that you want to put into a resolution.
Yep.
And again, it could be, recognizing, because there's such a long way ahead. I mean, people think of it as immediate, but it's a long way ahead. So there may be certain conditions that you put in to say, this needs to be met at this point and whatever.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
I'd like to just give a couple brief kudos. I wanted to give a kudo to Arts Coordinator Brendan Smith and intern Yenny Viatoro. They have done wonderful work lately with the We Are Tacoma work. I have come to some very interesting programs, and they're getting a lot of people attending, so they're really doing the kind of outreach work that's very nice. And so I just wanted to give a shout out for their work. One of the great events that there is planned for tomorrow. It's a screening of a documentary called, I think, Burkinabe Rising. It's about a nonviolent resistance movement in the country of Burkina Faso. It'll be held tomorrow night at 7:30 here. Not only will the brother of the slain former president be here, but so will the ambassador from Burkina Faso. How wonderful. And so I think that's a pretty neat thing. On a personal note, I'll just mention that a couple months ago I found out that my husband's family was originally from Burkina Faso, so I'm particularly interested in that. And I also wanted to give a kudo to Jason Damweber. I don't know if it's really a kudo. It's work. He was recently nominated and elected to serve on the Maryland City County Managers Association Executive Board. And since the ICMA conference is going to be in Baltimore next September, he has a lot of work ahead of him. So it's an honor, but it's also a lot of work ahead. And I appreciate his service actually to our organization.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And as my grandmother used to say, good work is only rewarded with more work. So congratulations on that. All right, now moving ahead, we have our voting session. Now we have our voting session. We have a resolution authorizing a temporary partial closure of the unit block of Grant Avenue for the Grant Avenue Market. I don't believe we have
This
Much to say
is
on
the same as we've had
Yeah.
each year. Market is to be held on Sunday, May 13th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. There's street closure hours. Because this is a city kind of approved function, the council needs to act to close the street during that time.
Terrific. Do I have someone who would like to move the resolution? Councilwoman Kostick, do I have a second? Councilmember Seaman seconds. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the resolution passes. Now we will move into our budget work session. This is, we began the conversation regarding our reconciliation list. Well, we didn't really begin it. We've been doing it throughout the process, but we put together a list on Monday evening. And I just want to, before we dig into this, first just thank everyone, the public, for their comments and their engagement. This year, I think we've, even this evening, from the resident Kelly from Ward 6, some very great comments on how we might think about improving our process moving forward. I will say, having been on the council now for a number of years, that each year the staff does do a terrific job, and it improves the process, I think, for all of us. And, we're always looking for ways to continue that improvement. I think this year, as last year, we had an open house. The level of information, the number of questions answered by the staff to residents and the council has really, and the timeliness of it has really been very helpful this year. And I just want to thank the city manager, the deputy city manager, our head of finance, and all our department heads for working really very diligently over the last few weeks. Okay, so what are we doing tonight? Well, this is the sausage making process. So ask you all to bear with us. What we did, so on Monday night, as I said, we had a list, and what we have been doing the last couple of years that worked out pretty well is put this into an Excel spreadsheet. And that we have, this is one option, and you'll see here we're just looking right now at general fund expenditures. As Councilwoman DeBala has noted in other places, there are other ways that we get city revenue, there are other funds, but basically when we're thinking about the property tax rate and what we need to set that at, we're really looking at our general fund expenditures. And so after our meeting on Monday night and listening and talking to my colleagues, I put together 3 options with their input so that we could look at overall what different packages could look at if we added or subtracted different things. And so what I'd like to do is present the 3 options now. Ask my colleagues if there is one that generally represents their preference for our reconciliation list. If we have a majority saying yes on one of these, then we'll dig into that one more specifically. I would like to, one thing, draw your attention to is there have been a couple of changes since Monday night, and I guess when we get to those, I will identify them. Councilmember Smith, did you have something you would like to say?
I'm just getting ready to.
Okay, all right. So on option 1, here you'll see that we added we have the increase on the Flower Avenue project as we spoke about throughout our budget meetings. When the bids went out, there was additional money that needed to be added to this project, so that's $230,000. When the budget was put together, there was a correction that needed to be made in the HCD personnel budget, so we can take out $85,000 there. Councilmember Kovar has put on the table taking out the additional funds, $100,000 that is currently in the budget above what we need to do for our police pension contribution. In this option, that money stays in the budget. And so we'll have another option where we take it out, but this option, it stays. In addition, we discussed on Monday night, Councilmember Siemens and I put forward taking out money regarding ADA sidewalk work on city streets. We're proposing to take out $300,000 there. That leaves $200,000 for ADA city streets, as well as $500,000 for the new sidewalk work to be done. Councilwoman Kostick had put some information in there regarding moving some money around on the ADA on SHA streets and new sidewalks, but I believe we're taking that out, so we're just going to zero that out now after we've had conversations back and forth with the head of our public works. The next item, Councilmember Siemens put forward an increase in the equipment replacement reserve. To bring that to our full funding level, it should be $780,000 for this year. The city manager put forward $700,000. Councilmember Siemens asked that we put in the other $80,000 to make some of the math work. I put $60,000 in here in this option, and we'll see if it stays there. As we've been discussing regarding staffing, our police department has requested 2 new officers this year. We put on the table on Councilwoman DeBala put on the table on Monday evening, taking out one of the new police officer positions. It would be a half-year position for this year, and that is reflected here, taken out of the budget. The other request was also by Councilwoman DeBala, the elimination of the economic development coordinator position. That one stays in for the moment in this option. Okay, so everybody following me how I'm doing this? All right. Councilwoman Searcy had pulled out the $60,000 currently allocated for public art, and so that's still there as a deduction. Then regarding the open space management plan and the Hillwood Manor Park, that's the $25,000. Moving things around, there was council discussion of keeping the money in for the open space management plan and then having a future work session regarding the allocation of that money. And so that's reflected there. Councilwoman Searcy, are you okay with that? Or
So I just have a question regarding timing. So I've looked at a couple of the prior budgets, and it's my understanding that the open space management plan is something that was delayed for a couple of years due to lack of staff.
Correct.
And that the initial plan or the initial proposal was to develop the plan, present it to the council, have the council approve the plan before making decisions regarding the allocation of those funds.
That's right.
So my question is, in this fiscal year, is the expectation that we will do both phases of that project?
That's the expectation, yeah.
And
but the $25,000, obviously, we put it in there, but presumably it would be pretty late in the year before we would know what to do with that $25,000 if that process were followed.
Okay. So my concern, given the plethora of things and the plethora of plans that we need to create action plans for, dealing with the same staff. So you have the Housing and Economic Development Plan that needs an action plan that the council needs to vote on and ultimately decide what we want to prioritize. I'm just trying to be realistic, especially if we're also talking about the potential of not providing the additional HCD staff that was requested.
Right.
So I just ask for folks to think realistically on whether or not the council will have had an opportunity to weigh in on the plan prior to the end of the fiscal year in order to determine what to do with the money. My thought is that what will likely happen is it will get bumped to the next fiscal year. And if that's the case, we should just allocate the money towards improving Hillwood Manor Park this fiscal year.
To me, that's up to you. And I think you're absolutely right that it is a staffing issue, and the timing would be later in the year. We try to do our best at making estimates and not getting caught short. But at this point, it is your decision on what to do with those funds.
And I think if we put, so what I heard from some members of the council is a lack of desire to spend money on a county park, and I'm not sure we are at this place right now to make well-informed decision on that tonight. And so I would propose that we keep the money in the budget. And I believe Ms. Dane said we were supposed to get the report, though, in June. Is that correct? Or am I misremembering on the open? I think it's going to be longer than that. They're going to be longer than that? I had June in my head for some reason. Sorry.
I think I put that in your head.
Yeah, that was in my head.
I think that's what it says on the website.
One plan sounds like another. The plan that I believe you are referencing is the cultural plan that the Arts Humanities Commission.
Okay. All right, that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't know. I had June in my head. So Councilwoman Searcy, I guess it's up to you. Do you want to allocate the $25,000 for Hillwood Manor Park in the budget this year, or would you be comfortable leaving it in the open space management plan, and we can schedule a work session soon about the allocation of those funds? Yep. You want to?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I don't know
Thank
what's
you.
happening.
And we would be able to do a budget amendment if we decided to use that, right?
Yes.
So it's not like it's dead by just leaving it in open space management
Right.
fund.
We can just leave it in there and then schedule a work session to come back and reevaluate how those funds are spent.
Thank you.
Could I just ask one other question? Could you clarify, and Mr. Royce mentioned this during the public comment period, we're spending for the maintenance of Lee Jordan and Ed Wilhelm. I know we talked about it the other day, but I'm still a little hazy on it.
Oh, there's my mic was having trouble there.
Yeah.
So Lee Jordan Field is owned by the school system, and the Ed Wilhelm is owned by Park and Planning. We have agreements to maintain them. There was there. I'm back. Okay, I won't touch anything.
The mayor pro tem did fine with
Well, the number of open mics that were allowed was only 4. That's why. So I had to up it, and then it turned everybody off. So,
right.
So
there was interest in making sure that Tacoma Park area teams could play on them, and there was real concern about how both fields were kind of permitted and managed. And so a number of years ago, there were a number of citizens who pushed very hard for us to go into those agreements to manage the fields. Yes, we pay for them.
We don't get any rebate.
We do not. No.
Can you send us later information?
Sure, we can send information, and I think that's there are, like I said, there are some agreements related to that, but I certainly will. And sometimes we get help, but it certainly is restricted.
Right. Councilwoman Kostick.
I just want to note on the website it does say June 2018 is the anticipated completion date for the open space management plan, so I think that's where that came from. But I do think moving forward that we should have a discussion about our open space in general, but also our role in funding things for the county or not, mm-hmm. and where we want to move forward with that. So I think that'll be an important discussion to have.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman DeBala.
I was just wondering if you wanted to outline the 3 options?
I think, before we do that, I'm outlining option 1, and we're discussing the Hillwood Manor one, and I just want to make sure, since Councilwoman Searcy put it on the reconciliation list, that it is as she requested it be reflected.
Sure.
So that's where we are.
So,
thank you.
I gotta make a decision, huh?
Yeah,
So I'm fine with keeping it on the reconciliation list as a component of the open space management plan. I want to stress that a couple of things are done. It was mentioned earlier, compiling some of the testimony from today to send to parks. But one thing I do want to reiterate, they are experiencing budget cuts as well from the county. So I would like for the city to not only share that information with the Department of Parks and Planning, but also with the Montgomery County Council. Mm-hmm. And then if we could draft a letter working with our lobbyist to ensure that folks understand the needs of all of the county parks in the city of Tacoma Park, the need for additional funding devoted to parks throughout the state or throughout Montgomery County, and that we do that and consider, whatever we get back from that, in addition to the needs of the residents in Hillwood Manor and a couple of other parks that have been identified, that are in the city and have been identified as high priority parks.
One other thought on that, our head of MNC PPC, Casey Anderson, or of the planning board, Casey Anderson, has been going around to every single park in the county. I just ran into him the other night, and he was talking about it. And so I don't think he's come to some of the ones.
We were scheduled to do it when I needed to.
Yeah,
we've been, Talisha and I have been tag teaming parks and planning people.
But if we get him to see the condition, that might help.
No, that's the plan. And we've been tag teaming them. So. And they fixed a bridge, but we needed a ladder fixed.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so then that stays the way it is. We took out the money for a council intern that we experimented with this year. The community policing consultation was put on the table. Really, this should say it's $40,000 for funds to use to supplement the community survey for focus groups, especially among harder to reach members of the community. That is actually staying in the budget in this option. And then the last one was an item I put on last week, was to take out money for the community grants program, for us to take this time to kind of step back, reevaluate how things are aligning with our priorities and other work we're doing in the city. It's $80,000. This reflects taking out $40,000 and keeping $40,000 in the budget this year, since preliminary applicants have already started applying this year. So the idea was just to cut the budget in half. So if this option one...
are we going to chat about this option?
Yes, we are. I'm going to go through all three, and then we're going to chat about it. All right, so this option one would give us a tax rate of 53.45, which is under the current tax rate we have now. One of the things I tried to do with each of these options, hearing from a majority of the city council, that folks would like to get the tax rate for this year at or below the current tax rate. So each of the options that have been presented reflect at or below the current tax rate. Okay, so that's option one. Moving to option two. Thank you. We see a lot of the same things: Flower Avenue money, making the change for the personnel in the budget. This one also keeps in the budget the additional pension money. The sidewalks are the same. For the addition to the equipment reserve, this one has $40,000. Again, Councilmember Seaman asked for $80,000. This budget, this option, this reconciliation one, has both of the positions that were put on the table on Monday night to be eliminated out of the budget. So we take out the one new police officer and the economic development coordination position. What's new here, and that's why it's highlighted in blue, is that there was a request from staff, if we eliminate the coordinator position, that we consider an intern for HCD for a year. This would be a year, and that would be $36,000. So I just want to highlight that that was new. You did not see that on Monday night. Public art, again, the $60,000 taken out. The Hillwood Manor Park and the open space would reflect the same conversation we just had. Again, council intern out. This one has the $40,000 for the focus groups, continue to stay in the budget, and the same as the community grants program. So really the big difference here is the staffing positions and the addition of the intern. And the tax rate for this one would be $53.31. The third option that we have, again, Flower Avenue there, the correction to the personnel staff. This one would have the deduction for the extra police pension contribution. Sidewalks remains the same. The ERR contribution, it would be $40,000. This takes out both of the positions and does not have the intern position included. For public art, this one kept in $30,000 out of the $60,000, didn't take out the whole $60,000. Again, the same conversation we had before about Hillwood Manor and the open space plan. It takes out the intern, and the focus group money is kept in, and the grants program budget is cut in half. And the tax rate for this would be 52.87. So I just want to have members of the council take a moment to review these, ask any questions, and then if people are okay with it, or if there's anything additional that folks want here, then what I would ask is that if there is one of these that people feel like that is more representative than the others, that we then take that one and focus on it. And when I say focus on it, I mean if there's one that you like but you'd like to move some money around within this, or have a conversation of maybe reducing or adding to one of the line items, that's what we do.
If I could just make one statement before you get into that, just kind of for the general public. The current tax rate's 53.48, and the one of the things that when I looked at the cost of inflation, if you put the cost of inflation, you come just about to the tax rate that I proposed, which was 54.50. So it's not. I don't want you to necessarily do anything different as you're going through this process, but I want people to kind of keep that into proportion. That it really. This is keeping very close to the current tax rate that you have of these three options.
Yeah. Thank you. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to thank you for all the work that you and staff put into bringing these options together like this. I think this is a good way of presenting these rather than trying to go down the Chinese menu and deciding which pieces we want and don't want. I really think we're close on all of these, but I have the same problem with all of them, and that is, it's not one problem, it's two, because I'd have to counterbalance things, right, to keep us within the same ballpark. I'm concerned about the elimination of one new police officer position that is, about $40,000 there. At the same time that we are leaving $40,000 in the community grant program. I think, as we discussed last week, the grant program was a great idea, and we've struggled with it off and on through the years. But I think it puts us in the wrong business. I think it's up to each resident to decide how they want to support the nonprofit organizations in the city. I think that we can offer the services of our newsletter and our great website to try to advertise a little better some of the needs that nonprofits in the community have. But I think it's wiser for individual residents to be able to decide how they want to spend their money in supporting of nonprofits, rather than us collecting the money in the form of taxes and then deciding how we think the nonprofits should be supported. And I'd like to just point out that there are certain organizations that the city council has felt passionate about, that do specific programs to address specific needs that we want to advance. And this is not in any way touching that partnership program that we've talked about and worked with in the past. So I think it makes far more sense for this city and for the city residents for us to go ahead and fund that new police position and let the grant program work in a better fashion. Thank you. And that's for all three of these options. And I guess I should go on and say, which option do I like best? And if I win this argument, I will support any of the three. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. Councilwoman Kostick.
Thank you. I have a couple of thoughts, but I also wanted to take a moment to see if we could get some information related to a couple of these things from staff. First of all, I was curious if someone could speak a little bit to the police pension contribution.
So the police pension contribution is additional funds that we've been contributing for quite a number of years now. Our police pension fund, I think, is about 13 or 14 years old. So it's a relatively new fund, and so it was very underfunded when it began. It took a while. We have had adjustments to it. We have a wonderful advisory pension board that reviews these and makes recommendations to the council for action. And one of the recommendations is that we continue to lessen that that deficit. And so I think it's not as much as somebody might want to put in there, but it is, I think, a good standard amount to put in each year. And it's been seen positively by the actuaries, although they recognize that meeting their actuarial recommendation is the minimum that we should be doing, and they are happy that we always do that.
And so how was the 100,000, or how was that aspect determined? Was there a certain formula considered, or what was the thinking
one year
with that?
I think there's actually 2 years we put in 200,000 at the beginning, but it's been more that it just seemed like a relatively substantial contribution. It's small within the overall contribution because it's a large payment that we make every year, and officers contribute quite a lot of their funds also towards that. But I think it's just that it's a good number. It can change.
Okay.
And I think that it started. Councilmember Grimes actually had started this a number of years ago when he was on the city council, and I think it was 200,000. Then we moved it to 100,000 as like continual, just making that extra little payment.
Sure.
So.
We've made pretty good progress, but I think it's going to be several years more before we kind of feel like we've got it under control. So I do appreciate having the extra funds for that.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to know more about was the proposed intern position in option 2. I'm curious what exactly the role of the intern would be, what types of things it would work on, how that would compare to a staff position.
Well, it was basically when I was hearing about the idea of just having one new position in HCD, just concerned about their workload. And so I said, is there maybe some intern activity? It's, to me, the most important thing is the economic development manager position that would have the major kind of approach to policy and working with stakeholders. But there's a lot of work just to be done going out and helping talk to businesses or work on open space plans or these various things. So I'm not sure. I don't have a program for it. I just was thinking that a little bit more bodies would be really helpful.
Another important difference there is that an intern isn't categorized as an FTE. It doesn't accrue the same benefits and things like that. So, whereas you add a position, it's generally for the longer term. An intern doesn't necessarily have to be.
So one of my concerns with that is it looks like that's being put in for a full year, whereas we're looking at hiring the economic development manager for, I believe, 3/4 of the year.
It's up to you.
Okay.
I don't have to me, when we looked at the half-year position, it's not that I wouldn't want the body there, but we really knew that it was going to take a while for the economic development manager to get on board. We're not sure exactly when that position would get hired, and then have that person identify what complementary assistance that person would need. And so that's, so it's up to you.
Okay. So among these options, I would say probably the one I'm leaning most towards is option 3. I think we need to. I think it makes sense to wait on the second police position and the economic development coordinator position. I do think there's work for those people, and I think it makes sense to be looking at those next year. But kind of looking forward, I feel like we can start to do some of that work this year, and we'll have an opportunity to reevaluate next year and see, in terms of the economic development position, see where we are and what we really need. We've been down a planner for most of this year, so we already have a planner, which is great, and that'll be a replacement. And then we'll have this new manager position, hopefully. So I think that sort of fills some of the needs, and I know it doesn't go far enough to address everything that I know there's a lot of work in the department. I mean, I and all of us I know are calling on people all the time and asking for things, and I know they're working very hard. But I do think given the tax rate and the uncertainties at the national level that it makes sense to be a little cautious on adding those long-term expenses at this time. Related to the police pension, that's one of my concerns. Currently, option 3 has that the $100,000 removed from that contribution, and I would like to see us talk a little bit more about that. But otherwise, I think option 3 is moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you. Councilmember Searcy.
Can we talk a little bit about the public art effort? And I think one of the main differences between the options is taking it completely out versus reducing it to $30,000. I guess my main question is, at the $30,000 level, what could we get? Like, what does that buy us? And where are we in the process?
Oh, dear. I'll ask Ms. Daines to answer that for you.
Based on past experience with the development of public art projects, we've seen projects that have ranged from $1,000 up to about $20,000, though we've gone as high as $40,000, depending upon the scope of the project. Our original intent was to do, have a goal of 3 projects that we'd be able to complete and that we would scatter throughout the wards. If the funding was cut at $30,000, potentially we could do one large project and a series of smaller public art projects that could be temporary in nature.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Daines, when you say temporary in nature, would this be the place where the pop-up art that was done with Pyramid Atlantic and Marty Ittner?
Correct.
That's the example here.
Yeah, something.
Would that be a small project, or is that a medium size? Just curious.
Honestly, I don't remember how much that was funded as far as the grant funds, but that would be sort of a medium-sized project.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Smith.
First, let me say that, when we go through these budgets, these are really, really difficult decisions for the council, and some things have to get cut. We're trying to look out not just for right now, but for the entire fiscal year. And we've heard from a lot of residents that do not want to see a tax increase. I received an email today from a Ward 5 resident, asking why I currently have this position to be more fiscally conservative. I think that's because of what I've seen and heard from the county council, the county executive. They do not believe that the revenues that they have seen in the past are going to be the same in the future in Montgomery County. So I think we need to be prudent and make sure that at this time we do not increase taxes. So let me talk about one of the option that I think I am favoring right now. That is option 3. One thing that I would like to change, I would like to eliminate the equipment reserve, $40,000 altogether. But I would bring back the $40,000 for the community grants, because people have actually applied for these grants this year. There has been some talk from city staff to different providers, nonprofits in the city. I think next year we can say that we're not going to provide this funding, but I think many organizations think that this is, a source that they can get funding for it this year. I don't think anyone said it's promised, but they think that there is grant funding. The other thing that I would like to get more information on is the decrease in ADA city sidewalks. How does that impact the Flower Avenue Green Street project on the western side of the street? Can I?
Well, in the discussion that we've, I guess, had a little bit by email, I mean, that is something that we would be a key piece. Okay. I don't see that. It would be my strong advice that we do the western side of Flower Avenue with most of those funds.
Okay. And regarding the police pension reduction of $100,000, I would like to add back $50,000. I think it's important that that the city puts some money in addition to the large payment that we make annually. It's good that we put something else in there. So my choice is option 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman DeBala?
Yeah, thank you. I also prefer option 3. And rather than talk about all the specific line items right this moment, I would offer that I'm okay with looking at the city sidewalk funds for another $50,000, and based on the list that we all got, it looks like at least the ones in my ward would be covered, but quite seriously, it looks like there's enough in there to be able to take a little out if it helps to do some of these other projects that people feel strongly about. So I just want to put that back in there on the list as a possibility.
The decrease is on the ADA, not new sidewalks. The new sidewalk budget stays the same.
Right, and I'm
you want to put in an additional
50? I'm saying that if it helps with all of these other priorities, we might go back to thinking about that. That would be okay with me.
I think she's saying she'd take out $50,000 from it.
Yeah.
So reduce the
new sidewalks
Got it. I'm sorry.
By not the 100 from before, but the 50 to free up some. Because I'm a little concerned about cutting the community grant program in the middle of the grant program, and I completely support the notion of reviewing it and looking for a better way to target those low and moderate income groups that we've been the programs that we've been targeting with that grant program. But changing in midstream does bother me a little bit. I wanted to hear a little bit more about the intern. Specifically, we're talking about reducing the intern that the city council has now, and we're talking about adding an intern who presumably is at a different level of professionalism. And I just want someone to comment on that, because the numbers.
It's just the same. So it'd be this would be not having money after July 1 for a council intern.
Right, and instead of transferring that just over to HCD, we're increasing it.
Our council intern is not a full-time intern. He does not. He's not 40. Like whatever.
He's half-time.
He's half-time. He splits his time between us and the city clerk's office.
Okay, so the difference in
right.
The
so this doesn't
is,
have anything to do with HCD. This is simply, this is the council's intern. Funds for a council intern would not be included after July 1.
Right. I was talking about the. Okay, I've got my answer. Thank you.
Okay.
One's part-time, one's full-time.
The one on option 2
yes.
that was a possibility was the amount that was listed there was for a full-time. It's completely flexible if somebody would go for that.
Okay, I just wanted to compare the two. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I also, as several of my colleagues said in the earlier portion of the meeting, appreciate all the comments and inquiries and emails that I've received from residents of Ward 1 about various aspects of the budget. It's been very helpful in understanding people's views. And I think, and I've said this before, that we have several factors now that are affecting, I think, the way people look at it, the uncertainty of the federal tax law, as my colleagues have said, the increasing assessments of home values that a number of residents are experiencing, and we also have a lot of other big projects that are already underway. And so all those things lead me to think that this is a budget when we shouldn't be taking on other major new initiatives on the whole. I do think it's important to try to get the tax rate below what it currently is. We actually reduced the tax rate the last 2 years, and I'm glad that we have a chance to potentially do that again while still preserving, I think, from my perspective, all the key programs that residents, in particular low-income residents, rely on. One just general point that I'd like to make, and I don't expect us to discuss this in major detail today. I've mentioned this to a couple of people in phone conversations earlier today, a couple of my colleagues. I was intrigued by the idea of that several people in Ward 1 talked about, of seeing what for next time around, what a constant yield package would look like, and then that would enable us to figure out what the different trade-offs were. So I know the constant yield rate doesn't come out until the budget is well underway, but maybe there could be a letter from the city manager that would say, okay, here's what under constant yield, if we made these various changes to the proposed budget, we could get there. We don't have to decide that now, but I think we would benefit from a work session sometime this year, not waiting until the next budget cycle, to explore maybe there's some other interesting ways of figuring out some of this. I don't expect anyone to
actually, if I could just say one,
welcome to hear.
The constant yield is the amount of revenue we get this year. So you can figure that out at any time. We can have that discussion at any time. We take that number and say, what does it mean? And recognize that it's obviously going to be a decrease in service.
Right.
But you'll have a set number, and that can have a discussion at any time. We don't need to wait till the February number for that part.
Okay, but that's helpful. And I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's great that we have council priorities, and you do an excellent job of then incorporating some of our council priorities into the budget. And I'm not going to say I'm upset because something that's a priority that I have got included in there. I just think maybe it would be helpful if we could find a way, before all those things get incorporated, to say these are what these various things cost, and then we can decide, okay, I like that idea, but maybe that one's expensive. I like this idea, and that doesn't have as much of a cost. So again, I'm not expecting us to resolve this now. It's just I think a useful discussion that we can have. So I'm going to just jump to the plans. Thank you, Mayor, for putting these together. I like the third one myself, best of the three, option three, and I just want to say a couple of things about that. I had originally been the person who proposed the council internship. I can see that may be on its way out. It's no knock on the gentleman. Evan is doing a great job who we have there. I'm willing to have that fade out. And in terms of the ADA sidewalk, a lot of that is in Ward 1. I'm willing to have us remove that for this year also. And maybe some people don't think that's such a big concession, but I'm mentioning that anyway. On the police pension, I sent around a note about this, so I just want to say a couple of things about that. So we put in the recommended amount from our independent actuary every year. This past year, I think it was about $1.2 million, or a little bit more than that. There's something like $12 million or so in the fund. And I mean, the city manager is right. If we put more in there, then that's not a negative. But my point has been, and what I said in the document that I sent around to my colleagues was, if we say, okay, here's a 5-year plan, here's how much we're going to put in each of the next 5 years, tied to data about what we anticipate happening with the pension and with our police force, to me then, okay, that's an opportunity to really think about what we're going to do. When I hear that it used to be 200, now it's 100, and it might be 50, it's arbitrary. Those are arbitrary numbers. They're not tied to anything. All the rest of the things we're talking about here are very either linked to specific data or to responsibilities that the new staff would potentially have, or to initiatives or programs within the city. So to me, the 100,000 isn't something that would be a massive loss if we didn't do it, and I think we ought to not include it. And people talk about, well, there's unfunded liabilities, and what would happen how come we don't have all the money in there that everybody's going to need? Well, that only would happen if the entire police force filed for disability tomorrow, and if that happened, there's something else going on in in the world that we have to be very concerned about. So to me, the 100,000 can be knocked out. And then just a couple of other quick points on the equipment reserve. I think you mentioned, Ms. Ludlow, it depends how you calculate it. So one calculation was that it was 80,000 short, but then when you listed the average amount we spend each year, it was still within that. So there seemed to be a little bit of a difference there. And
no, if you do the calculations in the chart, we're $80,000 short.
Mm-hmm.
What I do know is that the numbers vary a lot from year to year. So I looked more than 5 years out. I looked at a number of years and didn't see, like, year 6 wasn't like a huge increase that we needed to have extra funds away, for. And so I was comfortable, and I usually just try to pick the 100,000 that's somewhere in somewhere in that range. So I think there's some flexibility, but if you want to stick with the actual formula, it should be 780 total.
Thanks. So I'd propose taking the full 80 out as opposed to just the 40. And it seems to be 40,000. There's a number of 40,000s. So I think Councilmember Siemens mentioned, made a compelling case on the community grants program. No one's been told they will get a grant, so I don't think that there's any problem with pulling back on that. And then I'd like to at least have a vote on the community policing consultation, or I should say the focus groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll stop there.
Great. So we have 4 council members now who have voiced a preference for option 3. I have Councilwoman Searcy and Siemens lights on. Did you want to say something, or should we just start going down option
I actually
3?
have a question.
Yeah.
So one of my major concerns are our reserves.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly mentioned it.
Yep.
I echo it. And I'm new to the process, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand. Is it necessarily the case that the cost cutting that we're doing right now automatically reduces the tax rate? Or should we think about what additional revenues we may need to divert to the reserves and how that might also impact the tax rate? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. No, when I proposed 54 and 50 cents for the 54.5 cents for the tax rate, I was looking also at at future years. What is it so that we have that revenue, that reserves for future years? And so there's a couple ways to do this. Jason, if you scroll down to the yellow, the unassigned fund balance on this option, if no changes are done to option 3, is over $3 million, which I really appreciate. I in fact, it should be closer to $4.1 million, but over 3 is very important. Some of the things that you can do, if with this option 3 as written, there's a tax rate of 52 cents 0.87. You can add some money into the green part at the top, which is the revenue section. That'll raise the tax rate. It increases some of the, so it would increase the tax, but it would also, again, help our reserves. So there's a variety of ways that you can do that. The ERR functions in a bit of a reserve. In a different way, the pension fund kind of is its own category of that. I'm very happy to see this council consider the reserves, and so how you deal with that, there's a little bit of work of art. It's and balancing, but I appreciate that attention.
Could I ask just to check the formulas on this, because
did something come up wrong?
It seems. And maybe I'm just really tired.
No, I'm confused too.
But I'm feeling like the reserves are going in the wrong direction vis-a-vis the tax rate.
Yep.
Yeah. Because option 3 has our lowest tax rate, but the highest reserve, where option 1 has the highest tax rate but the lowest reserve.
I think it has to do with the things you're taking out.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. So, that's why I was.
Yeah,
I was noticing that too when I saw we were in the option 3 over $3 million. I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I believe that that's the reason.
Okay, it's the items.
always happy to double check formulas. But that's the, the 390,000 is the difference between on the expenditures portion. So, you're cutting things out. So,
is there there's a formula, so based on what we cut and how those funds automatically, I guess what I'm trying to understand is if we're keeping the tax rate at a higher level, right, and maybe we are cutting some things, but we're not cutting enough, I would assume that the amount that would go into reserves would be higher because the tax rate is higher. But it seems like this is happening.
It can do it either way. So you can either add money or you can take away expenditures. So you could have left all of the stuff in the pink zero, but in the green added in $390,000, and you should end up at this kind of you'd have a higher tax rate, but you would have the same amount of reserves.
Wait a minute.
Did that work, or did it go backwards?
Wait, I think so. Is this the general fund revenues tax rate? Is that is in the formula? Does the formula account for our proposed tax rate or the steady rate? So this has 0.545.
That's at 545.
So
right. So that's right.
So would the revenues be based on the tax rate? I guess I'm just trying to make sure that that's jiving.
I think it corrects for them, and now it's certainly the way it's always worked. But we don't have it, so it goes back to change the number. It will when it comes to you for the vote. It will have a different amount of your general fund revenues because it'll be reflective of the.
So tonight, the reserve that's an unknown quantity.
Yeah, I think that may be the case. I'm sorry, you're right. I think you're right.
Okay.
What's right?
We don't know what the reserve is.
We don't know what the reserve is. I always need to go back and look through it again. Right. I mean, obviously, if there's an issue, I'll let you know. But.
So should the focus of the discussion today be on what we want to propose adding or subtracting, and not necessarily what the final tax rate will ultimately be if these numbers are not accurate? I don't want to have people under the assumption that their tax rate is going to go down by a proportion that it
won't be final tonight.
It won't
because
be final
we'll have
tonight.
to check the numbers.
Right.
It will be final.
And I know we always have a little bit of a check.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is what you want to take in, add to or subtract.
Okay.
If you are subtracting expenditures so that we're saving more money, the tax rate goes down.
Okay. Good. Councilmember Siemens, do you have a?
I do, and I thank you. First of all, you mentioned the most important thing, and it's competing, but that vegan cake is getting more important all the time. The reason I wanted to talk is I hear some hesitancy to support my position on the police position, and I just wanted to elaborate a little on my concern. I think many of you know that I have been very critical of the police department through the years, especially as it works towards not just defining, but actually being a community organization. And I'm really excited that we have a new police chief and that his vision fits so well with what I think we've talked about wanting here in the community. And I am really, really hesitant not to give him the resources that he feels are going to help to move us in that direction in the near term. And for that reason, I, look to see where, where we can maybe agree on finding those resources for him. And when we talked about the grant program, I think I said everything before about that, and my feeling about the relative importance between those two things, the police position and the grants. But I just wanted to make the observation, I don't think that this number in the grants accurately reflects the extra overhead that we have in processing that whole grant program. And I think it's not a minimal number. I think there's some significant number in there in helping to prepare for the grants and reviewing them and also administering them after they're in place. But thinking that I may not reach agreement with everybody on this council, as an alternative, I would suggest that if my colleagues have the passion for the grant programs, I would suggest that the police consultation be dropped, and that would be the $40,000 needed to staff the position that's been requested by our chief. With that, I rest. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we are looking at, a majority of folks have expressed a inclination towards option 3, so I think we'll use that as our jumping off place. And since Councilmember Siemens, you last spoke, maybe we'll take up your item first. And I think, how should we do this? You put two things on the table. One, let's first see if we have support for putting back the police officer position, and then we'll look at where we're going to offset that, if that's okay with you, since you've put two things on the table. Is that all right?
You're driving.
Thanks. I'm trying to. So I will express my support in including the other officer position. One of the things as I went through the Community Police Academy that came through very strongly, meeting many of the police staff and officers, was their desire to do more, but also knowing that they have a lot on their plates already. And so many of them talked to us while we were doing the police academy about the need to have, more officers to help do the coordination or do other things that we want in the city. So I would also be supportive and figure out later where to take that money from. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to this. Councilwoman Searcy, your light's on? Okay.
Yeah. I would support that. This time it's hard, as Councilmember Smith reiterated, the desire to balance all of the different competing priorities. For me, finding the money in the budget, as Councilmember Siemens has managed a way to do, it's important, but it's also important to keep in mind the great service that our police staff provide. There are many instances where we have community meetings in my ward, and there are more police officers there than there are actual residents. And I've only heard wonderful things about the engagement and the responsiveness, and that's something that we want to continue. So I would support that. I would support reallocating those funds.
Great. Councilwoman Kostick.
So I want to echo the support for the police department and all that you do, but I do not support adding back in that position. This is not a matter of just $40,000 in a one-time sense in the way that the community policing consultation is. It's a long-term commitment to a staffing salary and everything that goes along with that. So I am hesitant at this point in time to move forward with something that's going to commit us in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman DeBala.
I feel similarly. I'm mindful of your concern, Councilmember Siemens, to not have these little pockets of money but not be supporting basic services. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. When I look at the chart that we were given about this $40,000 being the half year and then a full year the next year, and all the support that goes with that, which is essential to having a police staff person who can do their job, it's more money than it sounds like, and I'm reluctant to embark on that for two positions, because we're already funding one position. this year. And it's not a lack of support for the police department. It may be in Ward 2 that there's still a little work to be done to prove that we are really changing the tide and giving the kind of police services that people in Ward 2 expect. And so I'm great to go with the 1, but 2's a bit of a stretch for me right now.
Okay. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. I agree with those who just spoke. I do want to say that I think Chief Duvall is doing an excellent job. I've had a number of opportunities to interact with him and with the police force generally. So to me, it's not about that. It's just about how much we can take on at this time. And as Councilmember Kostick in particular mentioned, and Councilmember Duvall as well, it's not a one-time expenditure. It's an ongoing contribution to the budget for the police. That's the reason that it's being requested. And I would prefer to keep what we have in option 3, where that position is removed.
Okay. Councilmember Smith.
I guess I'm going to echo my colleagues. Their sentiments about this police position. The only way I would support adding the 2 positions if we found a way to reduce spending in other ways that included the fringe benefit piece, not just the half year that my colleague Councilmember Siemens recommended. So I think the chief is doing an excellent job, but I don't think this is a time that we increase the staff of the police department by 2 positions. And I'd also like to say, with this position, I hope it is for the lieutenant position rather than the community development.
That's not. All right, so that the second police officer, one of the new police officers' position, will be taken out of the budget and left on the reconciliation list.
I think my other 2 requests, though, should still be considered because we do want to do our best efforts with the budget.
We'll stick with you then, Councilmember Siemens. The other 2 was to on the community grants program. The budget this year is $80,000. What is in option 3 is to keep $40,000 in and take out $40,000. Would anyone like to speak to that?
I'm sorry.
And Councilmember Siemens wants to take that the whole $80,000 out. Sorry. So an additional $40,000 out of the budget.
I agree with Councilmember Siemens. I think he made a compelling case for. We do have the community partnership program where we invest it with on a longer term basis with key nonprofits that are active in our area. I think I agree with him. This is nice and it would be helpful, but people can find other ways to support these smaller organizations. There are many that I have worked with and helped establish and all those kinds of things, but I just think this is the time to take the money out.
Great. Councilmember Smith.
I'm going to disagree with my colleagues. I think that we should fully fund the community grants program and later in the year look at our options for possibly eliminating community grants in FY20.
Okay. Councilwoman Kostick?
I think we should keep the $40,000 reduction. I understand the argument, and I think it's a good point to consider moving away from these, but I think it's a little premature at this point in time to entirely eliminate the program. I think it makes sense to spend a little time reviewing it and have some funds dedicated to it at this point in time as we're having that discussion.
Great. And I will align myself with the councilwoman and agree with that as well in keeping $40,000 in. Councilwoman Searcy?
I actually think we should cut it and ask ourselves what is the target audience that we're trying to reach with these programs, and to what extent are we successful in reaching those folks, and what evidence do we have in terms of how these grants have been used, how effective they were, value add. If we don't have that, then I'm having a really hard time with justifying, putting additional dollars towards it. So,
okay,
thanks.
Okay, Councilwoman DeBala, you're the last one here. We have 3. Siemens, Kovar, and
CRC.
No,
don't tell me.
Okay. No, I'm sorry.
let me. The point of the program originally was to support groups that deliver services to low and moderate income residents, and that's a valuable purpose. And I think we should take a look at how it's working. I'm pretty reluctant to zero it out in midstream, and I would again go back to if it's a question of the dollars, maybe we can take the dollars out of something else. I would like to see it at least partially funded.
Okay, so we're kind of split here. We have Council Members Seaman, Kovar, and CRC supporting taking out the full $80,000. Councilmember Smith would like to keep in the full $80,000, and then myself, Councilwoman Kostick, and DeBala said some amount in $40,000 to keep it in there. And so, what do we do on this one? Councilmember Smith, do you want to reevaluate your?
Okay. I think I made a noble pitch for for my position on this, but I think in the interest of moving forward, I will agree with the $40,000.
All right.
So and I thank my colleagues who supported my suggestion.
Thank you very much.
I will agree.
All right. Yeah, I love it when that happens. Yes, Councilwoman DeBala.
So at what point do we make a motion that says that we are going to ask the committee to take a look at the kinds of questions that Councilmember Searcy raised?
I think we do that
right
after
now?
the budget.
After the budget?
Yeah,
okay.
We don't need to do that tonight.
All right.
I think we need to speak with the staff and the committee and have those conversations. Okay. And I know they're already setting up time to look at the applications they're getting in this year. So, right. But staff can communicate with them regarding their budget for this year. All right. So the next item that Councilmember Siemens put forward was the $40,000 for the focus groups to supplement the community survey. That we have $40,000 in the budget now. Councilmember Siemens would like to see that money taken out of the budget. Just as far as background, we have money in this year's budget to do the community survey. We have money to do 2 focus groups. The $40,000 we think would probably get us around 4, maybe if we're lucky, 5 extra focus groups. And as we talked about last week, in particular, the thought would be that these additional focus groups would be with members of our community that may be harder to reach, particularly when we're looking at doing a more traditional survey to make sure that we are reaching out to them and also gathering their opinions and engaging them. So what's on the table now is to take that $40,000 out of the budget. I think the lights are old. Councilmember Kovar, are you speaking to this?
If I can, yes.
Yeah.
So I agree with Councilmember Siemens. It sounds like there's some funding to do a couple of focus groups already. That may be helpful. And just to be clear, and for the newer people, this money was not approved for focus groups. It was approved for something different, which was an RFP was sent out to see if we could get some advice from outside contractors on advice on what, I'm paraphrasing here, but what community policing would really look like and what it could be. I think is more or less an accurate way to describe it. And now we kind of know the answer, and the answer is Chief Duvall. And but I feel like we're moving in that direction. I really do. I'm not just saying that to for laughs. And so this is another example. Would it be great to have all these additional focus groups? Yes, but I think we just have to say no to certain things. So that's where I am.
Okay. Anyone? Councilwoman Kostick.
I would like to keep the funds in for the community policing consultation. I do think Councilmember Kovar raises a good point in that this is a slight shift from the original purpose for those funds. And so I want to make sure if those funds are included that they are specifically focused on policing and that we're looking at that rather than using those funds to look at other aspects. I think Chief Duvall is amazing and we're really lucky to have you. But I also want to give you what you need in terms of the information to move forward with community policing practices. And I think that we need to have more of an evaluation and a systematic look at that. And I hope that these funds could be used in that way.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Searcy.
The data nerd in me wants the focus groups. I mean, I think one of the things that's really important for people to keep in mind methodologically is that if we don't do the survey right, then we won't get the answers that we need. It will the whole project will be a total waste of money. And so if one of the goals of our community survey is to really try to reach those residents, and I feel very strongly about this because many of those residents are in my ward, who are hard to reach for one reason or another, it's critical that we take the extra steps in order to reach them so that we can develop the necessary programming. So I understand the points that were raised about the original intent of the dollars. But when we're talking about maintaining the validity of the survey results, I think the focus groups are important. It might be helpful to get a little bit more information about, the methodology that the contractors have proposed and that kind of thing. But if we had that ahead of time, it would be a little easier to make a decision on how many focus groups, what's the scope, that kind of thing. It's up to us, yeah. So, I mean, I think dealing with surveys, 40K is about right. It just is. So I would actually vote to have the 40K go towards the focus groups.
And I'll just say, to follow up with Councilwoman Kostick and Searcy, that I also agree that this was not the original intent of these dollars. I was actually the one who originally put these dollars in the budget a number of years ago. And I would say that in having done just some informal focus groups with young people in our community, particularly talking to some young people of color as we were doing the police chief search, and working with Laura Charkoudian, who did pro bono a number of dialogues with us, with our police officers. Even though we have a wonderful chief, we have work to do, particularly with young men of color in our community and building trust between them and our police department and our city government. And not saying all of these focus groups need to be with that group of people, but I do think this is an area where we need to kind of dig deeper and understand their perspectives, where they're coming from, and how we can best build relationships and trust. So I'm for keeping it in the budget. Councilwoman DeBala?
Yeah. If it's focused on policing, and has anyone, if we have, I'm sorry I missed it, has anybody asked the police chief if you think this is useful? Because spending $40,000 and doing a focus group that would help you might or might not be the same thing.
If I can just say this, I do agree with the mayor. There is a segment of our community that we really need to make a connection with.
Yeah, that's
so it would really help in that respect.
Yeah.
It really would.
I'm in. Yeah, then I'm in.
Okay. So that's 4 of us for keeping that money in the budget. All right, moving forward, why don't we go to Councilwoman Kostick talked about, and Councilmember Kovar also talked about the police pension. Both sides of the issue. Councilmember Kovar has discussed taking out the additional $100,000 that we had originally put in the budget. Councilwoman Kostick has put forward keeping that extra $100,000 in the budget. So do other people want to speak to this and take a position?
Could I just ask?
Yeah.
Do we know what the impact of that would be on this calculation?
We could try. This is the wonderful thing about Excel sheets.
Well,
yeah.
It would be in it right now.
Yeah, but
So-
if we kept it in the budget, is that what you're asking?
So what is just go
The
down.
variation in
Right.
the tax rate.
So 5329 if you keep the $100,000 in the budget.
Yeah.
As opposed to 52 something.
Yeah,
As opposed to
5287.
5287. So that's the difference.
Are there other items after this one?
The other thing was Councilmember Smith brought up the ERR, and Councilman Dembala, you brought up the taking out $50,000 from the sidewalks. Those are the only things. But there are other things that.
Can I make a proposal?
Yeah.
Can we come back to this after we've talked about some of the other things to see how it impacts? Because for me, I would like to see the 100,000, but I'm also willing to tinker with that number a little bit and do something like 80,000 or something like that. So if we could push that down further after we've considered some of the other things, I think that would be helpful.
I did propose 50,000.
Yeah. Yes. So we could go down to the ERR. I think Councilmember Smith, you wanted to completely remove the 40. Is that correct? Yes. So that would keep the equipment reserve, replacement reserve at $700,000. That's in the budget right now. Councilmember Siemens had requested that we put back in, or we put in $80,000 to bring it up to the full 780. And what's shown here is 40. So people have, yeah.
So I want to make sure, Councilmember Smith, you're proposing keeping it as it is in the proposed budget. Is that right? Where we
Yes.
don't provide the 80.
Yeah.
I would support that. I do support that.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens, did you want to speak to this?
Well, I hesitate to speak to it, given my track record tonight.
It is your birthday.
Yeah. All right, this is my fourth birthday wish. I think as our responsibility is to be responsible in our allocation of funds in our budget. And when we have estimated that it's going to cost so much to plan for the future, and we've done that with a great deal of effort and being careful, I think that we should adhere to what the calculation shows and not spend money today that's going to cost our kids money in the future. And I will point out that I don't believe that when we've talked about the future prices on this equipment, that we've really gone to the extreme of considering inflation. And do we? Okay. See, this is why I lose these things. Okay. All right, I'll rest now while I have still one foot not in my mouth.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to this? And you could just say if you wanted to say how you would vote. Cut to bring the ERR down to the $700,000 that's in the budget now, or keep the additional $40,000 to bring it to $740. Councilwoman Kostick?
Sorry, you're trying to push my button. It didn't turn on. I would. I'm sorry, Councilmember Siemens, but I would support removing the extra 40,000. So keeping it at 700.
Mm-hmm. Councilwoman Searcy?
Ditto. I was with you on a couple of other ones. So.
All right. So the $40,000 is now taken out of the budget. So the equipment replacement reserve stands at $700,000. A little slow. No, we have 4 votes. We're moving along. So the other thing, do we want to go to sidewalks? And I'm sorry, Councilwoman Dembala, I still think I'm a bit tired tonight and not following. So you would like to see an additional $50,000 taken out?
Well, the reason that I suggested that is because when we got the lists of, so there's several different sidewalk funds. This is the one for new sidewalks and traffic calming on city streets, the kinds of things that are put forward by residents. Mm-hmm. This is not the ADA sidewalks and some of the other categories. And when I looked at what the details were that were given to us by Public Works, was it only today? It seems so long ago. It seemed to me that if we were in a jam, we could take some $50,000 out of that and use it for some of these other things. It sounded like we're moving along without subtracting that, but I still would like to put that out on the table.
Okay. All right.
But I had suggested it as a way to cover some of these other things that Councilmember Siemens had proposed.
All right. I would say I'd like to, for the new sidewalks, I had specifically proposed taking out the money on the ADA on city streets. On the new sidewalks, since, and the head of Public Works can correct me if I'm wrong, those were things that are already been initiated by residents or in a process, and I think we should continue them. As it is, when residents initiate new sidewalks or traffic calming, there's a process, and it takes a while. And I think for folks who are already in that, I don't want to delay that any further. So I would be opposed to taking out additional funds there.
Are all of those already like that? In other words, that's not.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So.
I agree.
You agree with me? Okay. Yeah. All right. Councilwoman Kostick?
I have two thoughts. One is that I was the one who originally proposed decreasing the new sidewalks, and after speaking with Ms. Braithwaite, I feel like I wanted to change my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important to have that $500 budgeted for that. I do also want to propose, though, increasing, keeping an increase. There's currently nothing here on the ADA on SHA streets. As I mentioned before, those are the sidewalks that are used by a large number of people in the city because they're the thoroughfares. So I want to propose adding in $30,000 to the SHA streets.
Okay, hold that thought until we finish on the $50,000 on taking out $50,000 on new sidewalks and traffic calming. You could be on a winning side here tonight.
I'm not going to.
Come on, no, you can. Like if you go with Councilmember Kovar, Kostick, and myself, you can come on. All right, Councilwoman Searcy.
Given that we're currently in the midst of the Glenside sidewalk design, I do not want to touch the new sidewalk money. I need this sidewalk, y'all. All
right, stay in the budget then. All right. Now let's move forward on Councilwoman Kostick. Addition of $30,000 on for ADA sidewalk work on state highways. How do we feel? Do we want to just scroll down and see what the tax rate is now, just so people get a sense? We're at 5270. Councilmember Smith, sorry.
If we add 30,000, what would that get us?
Not much.
I'm
gathering from.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's
All
not
right.
much.
So-
When it comes to infrastructure, it's always big money.
All right. So I currently don't support adding any additional money.
Okay. Councilman DeBala?
Well, I was okay with the transfer, but I don't know that it really helps to add a little bit.
Okay. Councilwoman Searcy?
If we're not getting anything for it. Maybe 30,000 may not even get us a block.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's not. Yeah. All right. I'll also agree with not adding that additional money. All right. So I think the next is, unless somebody else has something else, was going back then to the pension amount. Unless Councilwoman Kostick, are you okay with that now, or was there anything else before that? Because I think we've talked about everything else now.
We can go ahead with that. Yeah, let's go ahead with that.
Okay. So at the moment, Councilmember Kovar has put on the table removing the $100,000 that is currently in the budget. That is in additional money that we would put into the police pension contribution. Councilwoman Caustic has proposed keeping that money in the budget. Yeah.
So a short time ago, we agreed to actually go along with what was in the budget to support a reduction for the ERR, notwithstanding the fact that if we were strictly following the recommendations, we would have put that money in there. Now we've got something where we're already meeting the thing that's in there. And so my thought would be this is more easily in line with prudent fiscal concerns, to the extent that that may have bothered you about the last one, because we are fully meeting what our independent actuary asked us to do.
Without the extra money, is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Yeah. 100,000 is an add-on over and above what the independent actuary recommends.
All right. Councilman DeBala, do you have?
Not at the moment. No.
Okay. Anyone? Councilwoman Caustic?
I'll change my idea to support Councilmember Smith's proposal to change it to 50.
Councilmember Stevens?
I will support that.
Okay. I have a question for the city manager. Since we don't know, we can't figure out what the formula is tonight, what the reserves will be.
The reserves won't be worse than what I proposed.
Okay, that's all right. So we won't go under the 2.6. Right.
We'll come back and check, but as I was thinking about it, it's not going to go.
Okay, that's I guess where I was going with this, looking at the tax rate and everything, and just last year I actually voted against our tax rate in the budget because I felt like we went too low in our reserves, and I just didn't want to be in that position again this year.
Right.
So
we will come back and I'll probably send you an email in the morning just to confirm what the reserve rate, the unassigned fund balance amounts are, but with whatever the tax rate is that you come up with this evening. So there's that. But it would not be worse than what I had proposed.
Okay. And can the deputy city manager just put in, so we're at 52.7 for the tax rate, and if we drop that to 50...
Can you go change to 50?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So 5291. Yeah.
All right. So, sorry, I lost count. I had Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Siemens, Councilwoman Caustic supporting the 50. And I'll support that as well. Cutting the pension, even though I did support the 100,000, I think I will go with my colleagues on that. So I think at the this is what we'll just review what we have here. The additional money for Flower Avenue, taking out of the budget the HCD personnel person, the correction that needed to be made. We're taking out the we're reducing the additional amount we had in police pension to $50,000. We had $100,000 in the budget. The sidewalk ADA on sidewalks ADA on city streets. We're taking out $300,000 in the budget. We are eliminating one of the new police positions that was proposed, and the coordinator position. Public art budget got cut in half. We've talked about the open space in Hillwood Manor. That's a wash for now. Council intern is taking out. We're keeping in the money for the focus groups and having the budget on the community grants program. I think
that goes to 40,000.
Oh, the ER stays what it was in the budget, 700,000. Sorry. The WC manager is cleaned it up. I was like, things were moving as I was trying to read it. And I would just like to be on the record and just say, since it looks like we are going to be eliminating the coordinator position for economic development, that As we have been pointing out through our budget process, there are a lot of projects that are happening in the city and regionally. Some things we control, some things we don't have control over them. Purple Line coming in, the new math science building at Montgomery College, the hospital leaving and basically leaving us in a lurch and not keeping their promises. A lot of those things are happening right now, and that all falls on our HCD staff. As we are cutting this position, I just want the council to make sure everyone is fully cognizant of all the things that are happening, and that means I think we're going to have some serious conversations about prioritizing the staff time in HCD, and that may mean that some things don't get covered. And we're just going to have those conversations moving forward. So, all right. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions?
So what we'll do is we'll go back and confirm all this information, make sure that there's no glitches in the machine.
Yes.
Then we have a good amount of work that needs to be done to prepare the different ordinances for you for the next 2 weeks.
Right. And so I would just say, as residents who are here and people watching and my colleagues, at the moment it looks like the tax rate is 52.91. However, again, we just need to check everything to make sure that's correct. So I would not say that that is the final, just quite yet. We're getting close. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you. If the meeting is about over, I would like to remind people there is cake over here, and my staff has been keeping track of who gets a piece. Thank you.
Councilwoman Searcy, did you have something else to add tonight?
I just want to make sure that it's late and I could just be tired. I've been in the sun. For HCD, the personnel, so we approved the manager position. And so what we're talking about right now is the additional...
That's right, the lower level position.
The lower level position. Okay,
Yes.
I just want to make sure that that's confirmed. And I also just want to reiterate how thankful I am for the staff being so responsive and providing feedback. This is my first go around, and I know I haven't asked many questions because I'm just like, what? I don't get it. But I appreciate all of the time and attention that folks have given to answering questions that we have. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
And if I can just say, I really appreciate the council. You paid a lot of attention to this. I appreciate the priority sessions. I know there's people now are saying, well, let's start at the tax rate and go the other direction. But the priority sections really give direction to my staff about even the little things that don't cost a lot and about how to package that. And it means an awful lot, and I appreciate your work very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's eat cake. Thank you. We should always do budget recognition.
Trumpet vine. When I think of an image for the signature you trail across this world, I see a trumpet vine. I've watched